My name is Kellen, and the day my tribe scratched my name off the totem pole, something inside me actually laughed. Funny thing about being mocked your whole life. Eventually the insults just become background noise, like when through a cave. In my tribe, every child bonds with a totem spirit at 13. Wolf, bear, hawk, serpent. Strong totems that earn you food first at the fire. Mine was different. Mine was the forgotten totem, an old gray stone shaped like nothing, sitting at the edge of camp where nobody prayed. The elders called it a dead totem, a joke totem, the kind you get when the spirits can't even bother showing up for your naming day. My own father stopped looking at me after that ceremony. My mother died giving birth to me, so in his eyes I'd taken her life for nothing. For 19 years I carried water, skin kills other hunters made, and slept outside the longhouse, because forgotten boys don't deserve fire. And the worst part, I believed them completely. Right up until the night the beast horde came pouring down from the mountain. That night, half my tribe died screaming. I watched a blood-fanged wolf the size of a war canoe tear my own cousin apart, and nobody came to help. I ran. God's help me. I ran like every coward who ever lived, and I made it exactly 400 feet before the totem stone found me in the dark. It didn't glow. It didn't sing some grand prophecy. It just cracked open in my hands, like an egg, and something old and starving poured into my chest. I died that night anyway. The wolves caught up eventually. But dying, apparently, comes with a refund policy nobody ever bothers to mention. Because the next thing I knew, I was 13 years old again, standing at my own naming ceremony, staring at that same gray forgotten stone. And this time, I understood exactly what it was, and exactly what it had cost the last person foolish enough to wake it up. Let me back up, because you're probably wondering what kind of cosmic joke gives the deadest totem to the one kid who ends up mattering most. In my tribe, we believe every totem spirit is a leftover piece of something ancient that died a long time ago. Scraps, fragments, echoes. The wolf totem is maybe 1% of a real wolf god's soul. The bear totem, maybe 2%. Enough to make you strong and proud. My totem wasn't a fragment of anything small. It was the entire corpse of a god the world had collectively agreed to forget on purpose. The devourer of names. That's what the old stories called it. Back before the elders decided those stories were too dangerous to keep telling. A totem so hungry and absolute that the first tribe who bonded with it accidentally erased their own names from existence within a single year. So, they sealed it, buried it, pretended it never existed, and somehow, through 19 years of bad luck, it ended up bonded to me anyway. Second time around, age 13 again, I already know all of this, and unlike last time, I'm not going to let fear decide what I become. The naming priestess, an old woman named Orla, drags the ceremonial knife across my palm, exactly like she did the first time I lived through this. My blood drips onto the gray stone, and the crowd around the fire pit already starts snickering before anything even happens. There's the cripple's son. Someone mutters from the back, not even bothering to lower his voice. Watch him get nothing again. Last lifetime, that comment broke something in me. This lifetime, I just smile, because I already know exactly what's coming. The stone cracks down the middle with a sound like a dying heartbeat, and a wave of pressure rolls outward, knocking 3 elders off their feet. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Last time, everyone just saw a crack and called it broken. This time, they actually feel what's inside it. Orla stumbles backward, her wrinkled face going pale as moonlight. In 30 years as priestess, she has never felt a totem breathe like that. "What did you just summon, boy?" she whispers, gripping her ceremonial staff so hard, her knuckles turn white as bone. I don't answer her yet. I'm too busy listening to the voice crawling up from inside the cracked stone, low and ancient and starving. "Names," it whispers directly into my skull. "Give me names, little vessel, and I will give you the strength to never be forgotten again." Last lifetime, the voice terrified me into running. This lifetime, I already know the price, and I already know I'm willing to pay it. "Not your name," I tell it quietly, so only I can hear my own voice. "There's every single person who ever called me forgotten." The corpse god inside the stone goes very, very still, like a predator that just realized its prey isn't actually afraid of the dark. Then it laughs, a sound like grinding stone, and the totem mark burns itself into the back of my hand in jagged black lines. The crowd sees the mark, and the muttering stops cold. Even the chief's son, Braca, who's mocked me since we were toddlers, goes quiet. "That's not a totem mark," someone breathes. "That's a curse. Someone get the priestess. That boy's been cursed instead of blessed. Orla raises her staff like she's about to strike me down right there at the fire pit. The way the old stories say you handle cursed children. Last lifetime, I would have begged for mercy. This lifetime, I just hold up my marked hand and let her see exactly what's written there. The mark isn't a curse symbol. It's a name. My cousin's name. The one who died screaming under a bloodfang wolf in my last life. Orla's staff freezes mid-swing. That boy is 12 years old right now, alive and well, eating roasted rabbit by the eastern fire. How do you know the name? She demands, her voice shaking for the first time I've ever heard. Nobody taught you the old naming script. I didn't learn it, I tell her flatly. I lived it, and in 3 years, that same cousin dies unless something in this tribe finally changes. The whole fire pit goes dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the wood actually crackling and nothing else at all. Braca, the chief's son, finally finds his voice and laughs nervously, the way people laugh when they're trying to convince themselves to relax. Forgotten boy's gone mad from the curse, he announces loudly, like declaring it makes it true. Someone should put him out of the camp tonight. A few people actually nod along with him, because agreeing with the chief's son has always been easier than thinking for yourself around here. I look at Braca the way you look at a stranger when you finally see them clearly after years of pretending they mattered to you. Last lifetime, this boy spat in my food twice a week and called it tradition. This lifetime, I already know exactly how he dies too. Not by my hand, though. I'm not the villain in this story, no matter how badly this tribe wants someone to blame for what's coming. The beast horde, I say loudly enough for the whole gathering to hear. 3 years from tonight, it comes down through the northern pass. Half this tribe dies screaming before sunrise, and the other half spends the rest of their lives wishing they had listened to a warning. Orla's staff lowers an inch. She's old enough and wise enough to recognize the difference between madness and a man who's already seen his own death. You're describing the hollow year, she murmurs, almost to herself. An old prophecy buried 3 priestesses before me. How would a child know the name? Because I lived through it once already, I tell her. And this time the corpse god in my chest stays perfectly, patiently silent. The chief himself finally steps out from the longhouse, drawn by the commotion, his weathered face unreadable in the firelight. Chief Dorn looks at my marked hand, then at Orla's pale face, then at the cracked forgotten totem still smoking faintly at my feet. Explain yourself, boy, he says, and for the first time in either of my lives, the most powerful man in the tribe actually waits for my answer. So I tell them everything. The wolves, the screaming, my cousin's death, the 400 feet I ran before the stone caught up to me in the dark. I don't tell them about the corpse god whispering hungrily in my chest, or the deal it offered me about names. Some secrets stay mine alone. Half the tribe calls me a liar before I even finish talking. The other half goes quiet in that particular way people go quiet when they're scared. Braca, predictably, laughs the loudest. A forgotten totem boy predicting doom. He sneers. Next you'll tell us the moon is going to fall too. 3 years, Chief Dorn finally says, ignoring his son completely, which makes Braca's face twist with an ugly kind of jealousy. We will speak more of this when the sun rises, the chief announces. For tonight, the boy sleeps inside the longhouse, not outside in the dirt. That single sentence does more damage to my old reputation than anything else that's happened tonight, and I can see Braca practically seething. Forgotten boys don't deserve fire. They told me my entire first life. Tonight, for the first time, somebody finally disagrees out loud. As the crowd disperses, muttering and arguing amongst themselves, the corpse god finally stirs again, low and amused inside my ribs. Clever vessel, it murmurs. You didn't ask for power. You asked for Tom. Most who carry me beg for strength first and die confused later. I don't need you to make me strong, I tell it silently, walking toward the longhouse for the first time in either of my lives. I need you to make sure that when the wolves come down the mountain again, nobody I love dies screaming while everyone else just watches. The devourer of names goes quiet again, but I can feel it settling deeper into my chest, patient, ancient, and for once, genuinely curious about me. Behind me, Orla watches me walk away with an expression I've never once seen directed at me before. It almost looks like respect. 3 years, I think to myself, stepping through the longhouse doorway for the very first time. 3 years to turn forgotten into unforgettable. And somewhere deep in the mountains to the north, something massive and patient finally opens one slow, ancient eye in the dark. It doesn't know yet that this time, someone is actually waiting for it. Last lifetime, the tribe was prey. This lifetime, I plan to be the trap. Morning comes faster than I expect, mostly because I never actually sleep. The corpse guide keeps whispering, and I keep listening. It tells me things in fragments. The way an old man tells stories he's only half remembering himself. Pieces of a war fought before this tribe existed. There were other vessels before you. It admits at one point, almost reluctantly. None of them understood what I was offering. They only saw hunger. What were you offering? I ask, lying on a borrowed sleeping mat that already feels stranger than the cold dirt I used to sleep on outside. Memory, it says simply. Every name I devour, I keep. Every face, every voice, every small cruel thing a person ever did. I forget nothing. That should terrify me, and some small part of it does. But mostly it just feels like finally holding a weapon after 19 years of empty hands. At dawn, Chief Dorn calls a council fire. The kind usually reserved for war decisions or marriage disputes. Not forgotten boys with strange marks. Orla stands beside him, her staff planted firmly in the dirt. And for the first time I notice she hasn't slept either. I spent the night searching the old scrolls. She announces to the gathered elders. The Hollow Year prophecy is real. It is buried, but it is real. 3 elders immediately start arguing. The way old men argue when a comfortable light gets threatened by an inconvenient truth. Nobody wants to hear. Buried prophecies stay buried for a reason. One elder snaps, his gray beard practically trembling with indignation at the very suggestion. Chief Dorn raises a hand, and the arguing stops instantly. Because in 3 years he's never once asked for silence without getting it. The boy predicted a death that hasn't happened to a child, who hasn't even reached his own naming day yet. That is not the kind of thing men invent. Orla nods slowly, her eyes flicking toward me with something that looks dangerously close to belief. We prepare for the Hollow Year, she says. And if the boy is simply mad, another elder mutters, we will have wasted 3 years building walls against a storm that never comes. Better wasted walls than wasted graves, Dorn answers, and just like that, the council decides to listen to the forgotten boy nobody fed first. They don't decide to trust me, not yet. They decide to prepare, which honestly is all I ever actually needed from any of them. After the council fire dies down, Braca finds me near the eastern wall, his arms crossed, his face doing the thing it does before he starts trouble. You think one good guess buys you respect, he says, stepping close enough that I can smell the roasted rabbit still on his breath. I didn't guess, I tell him calmly, and something about my calm seems to bother him more than any insult I could have thrown back. Last lifetime, Braca's shit would have sent me sprawling into the dirt while everyone laughed. This lifetime, I don't even bother stepping back. He shoves me anyway, out of habit more than strategy, and I let it happen. Because right now, there's nothing to gain from fighting a chief's son in public. Enjoy your 3 years of pretending to matter, forgotten boy, he sneers, walking away like he's won something that was never actually contested. He doesn't know yet that I've already watched him die once, drowning in panic during the Hollow Year while everyone assumed someone braver would save him. That night, alone by the eastern wall, the corpse god finally speaks again, quieter this time, almost gentle in a way that feels wrong on something so old. You could take his name right now, it offers, just a whisper of intent, and I would devour every memory of Braca ever existing in this tribe. I almost consider it, just for a second, before the disgust catches up with the temptation. That's not what I want, I tell it firmly. Then what do you want, little vessel? It asks, and for the first time, it sounds genuinely confused, like a starving thing that's never met restraint. I want them to remember exactly who they mocked, I say, and exactly who saved them anyway. That's a better punishment than forgetting. The corpse god is silent for a long moment, and then it does something I never expect from a being that supposedly devoured entire civilizations. It laughs, low and surprised, like it's just discovered a new flavor of cruelty it hadn't considered before. Mercy is humiliation. How creative. Over the following weeks, I start training in secret, far from the Longhouse, far from anyone who might report strange behavior back to Braca's father. Not the chief's father, obviously. Braca's father is the chief. I mean Dorn's old hunting mentor, a retired tracker named Vass who lives alone. Vass lost his right arm to a blood-fanged wolf 8 years ago, and ever since, the tribe treats him like a cautionary tale instead of a teacher, which makes him exactly the kind of person nobody questions. When a forgotten boy starts showing up at his hut asking to learn how wolves actually fight, "You're the Totem boy," he says the first time I knock, not as a question, just a flat statement delivered with a bluntness only old hunters seem to keep. I am, I tell him, and he studies my marked hand for a long moment before stepping aside to let me in without asking a single follow-up question. Vaz teaches differently than the tribe's official trainers. He doesn't care about totem rank or family name. He only cares whether you survive the lesson. First lesson, he says, handing me a dull wooden spear nearly as tall as I am. Bloodfang wolves attack low and fast. Most boys die looking at the head. They watch the teeth, he explains, tapping his own missing arm with what's left of the other one. The teeth are theater. The shoulders tell the truth. I absorb every word like it's water after a drought, because last lifetime I never trained at all. I just ran, and running only delays the ending. Weeks pass into months. My hands blister, then callous. My arms ache, then strengthen. The corpse god watches all of it with quiet, patient interest. You're training a human body for a war you already survived once. It observes one evening, almost teasing. Why bother building muscle a god could replace? Because muscle is mine. I tell it without hesitation. Whatever power you give me, I want it standing on top of something I actually built myself. The devourer of names doesn't respond to that, but I can feel something shift in its presence. Something almost like approval, almost like respect. 6 months into training, Vaz finally lets me spar against a real Bloodfang pup, his old hunting partners captured years ago, for exactly this purpose. The pup is young, but already fast, already vicious, and the first time it lunges, I freeze for exactly half a second before old instinct saves me. Shoulders, not teeth. I remind myself, pivoting exactly the way Vaz taught me, and the wooden spear catches the beast across its flank instead of my throat. Vaz actually smiles, a rare and crooked thing on a face that's mostly forgotten now, and says only one word: better. Word eventually spreads that the forgotten boy trains with the one-armed hunter nobody respects, and predictably, the tribe finds new ways to mock both of us, to cripples teaching each other to die slower. Braca announces one day in front of half the younger hunters, and most of them laugh right on cue. I used to flinch at laughter like that. Now I barely register it, mostly because I'm too busy calculating exactly how many months remain before the wolves arrive. 2 years and 4 months. The corpse god reminds me one night, as if it can sense the calculation happening behind my closed eyes. You're keeping count too, I say, somewhere between amused and unsettled by how closely this ancient hunger has started paying attention to my life. I keep count of everything. It answers simply .names, .years, .promises. It's the only thing I have left from before the world decided to forget me. That's the first time it's ever sounded almost lonely, and despite everything, despite knowing exactly what it is, I feel something uncomfortably close to sympathy. By the end of the 2nd year, I've stopped sleeping outside entirely, stopped eating last, stopped being the boy everyone overlooks without thinking. Not because the tribe suddenly respects me, because Chief Dorn, quietly and without announcement, has started treating my warnings as actual strategy. New watchtowers go up along the northern pass. Younger hunters start training in pack formations instead of solo glory runs. Walls get reinforced with stone. Braca resents every single change, mostly because each new defense feels like one more piece of proof that the forgotten boy was right and he was wrong. He starts a rumor that I bribed the elders with totem magic, that my mark is corrupting Dorn's judgment, that the whole council has gone soft and superstitious. Some people believe him. Fear makes people creative, and creative fear always needs somewhere convenient to point, preferably somewhere already unpopular. I let the rumors spread without correcting them, because every wasted breath Braca spends on jealousy is a breath he's not spending preparing for the wolves. With 6 months left before the hollow year, the corpse god finally offers something it's never offered before. Are you ready to actually use me? It asks. I've been ready for 2.5 years, I tell it, and for the first time since the first cracked stone, I let it pour fully into my chest without resistance. The mark on my hand spreads, climbing my forearm in jagged lines like roots searching for water, and the pain is exactly as bad as I remember from dying. Vaz finds me afterward, collapsed against the eastern wall, and for once the old hunter doesn't ask questions. He just sits beside me until the shaking stops. Whatever you're carrying inside you, boy, he finally says, staring out at the mountains. I hope it's enough, because something out there is patient too. He has no idea how right he is, and I don't correct him, because some truths are heavier than even a one-armed hunter should have to carry alone. With the mark spreading and the corpse god finally fully awake, I start noticing things I never noticed before. Names hanging in the air like invisible threads. I can feel them now. Faint pulses of identity drifting off every person in camp. and the devourer of names practically purrs with hunger every time I walk past someone. Don't, I warn it sharply. The first time I feel it reach toward an old woman selling dried meat near the fire pit. We agreed. Not this tribe. Never this tribe. It withdraws, reluctant but obedient, and I realize with some discomfort that I've just successfully negotiated boundaries with a god that erased an entire people once. As the third year closes in, Chief Dorn calls me into his longhouse alone for the first time. No council, no audience, just two men and a fire between them. You were right about the watchtowers, he says without preamble. You were right about the formations. I need to know exactly how right you are about the timing. The wolves come on the new moon, 3 nights from now, I tell him, and watch the color drain slowly from a chief who spent 2.5 years half believing me. 3 nights, he repeats quietly, staring into the fire like it might offer a better answer than the one he just received from a boy he once ignored entirely. I have spent 2.5 years preparing this tribe to survive a night. I have already lived through once and barely escaped by running into the dark. This time, I tell him, standing up straight for the first time in either of my lives. I'm not running anywhere. This time, something else does the running. Dorn studies me for a long moment. The firelight carving shadows across a face that's finally stopped looking at me like a mistake. Whatever you carry in that mark, he says slowly. I hope the gods you're hiding it from are less hungry than the wolves we're about to face together. He has absolutely no idea how wrong that hope actually is, and for once, I let him keep believing the comfortable version instead of the true one. 3 nights left. 3 nights until the mountain remembers exactly how it forgot me once, and exactly how thoroughly I plan on making sure it never forgets again. Somewhere deep in the northern peaks, the beast horde stirs in its sleep, completely unaware that the boy it once erased without effort has spent 3 years becoming the trap. The night before the new moon, the entire camp moves like one nervous animal, hunters checking spears they've already checked twice, mothers counting children they already know are safe. Vas finds me sharpening my spear by the eastern wall and sits down heavily beside me, his missing arm catching the firelight in a way that always makes strangers stare. Whatever happens tomorrow, he says quietly, you already did more for this tribe in 3 years than most chiefs manage in 30. Remember that, no matter how it ends. I appreciate that, I tell him honestly, and for a moment neither of us says anything else, because some gratitude doesn't need extra words wrapped around it. Orla approaches as the fire burns low, her staff tapping softly against packed earth, her expression unreadable in the way priestesses train themselves to master. The old scrolls mention something about the hollow year I haven't told the council, she admits, lowering her voice so only I can hear what comes next. They say something else came down that mountain once, generations ago, before the wolves. Before any of this, something the wolves themselves were running from. My chest goes cold, and inside it the corpse god goes suddenly, completely alert, like a sleeping dog that just heard its true master's footsteps approaching. What kind of something? I ask, already half certain I already know the answer. Already feeling the devourer of names stir with something dangerously close to recognition. The scrolls call it the Hollow Shepherd, Orla says, and the name alone makes the corpse god inside my chest flinch so hard. I nearly drop my spear into the dirt. You know that name, I say silently, accusingly, feeling the ancient hunger inside me curl tight and small, like something remembering an old wound. I know it very well. The devourer of names finally admits, his voice smaller than I've ever heard it. The Hollow Shepherd is the reason I became forgotten in the first place. For the first time since this all began, I realize I might not actually understand the full shape of what's coming down that mountain. Tomorrow night, last lifetime, I assumed it was only wolves, beasts, animals driven mad by something ordinary, hunger or migration or the simple cruelty of nature doing what nature does. This lifetime, standing here with an old priestess's borrowed fears settling into my own bones, I'm starting to suspect the wolves were only ever the opening act. Tell me everything, I say to the corpse god, and for once it doesn't hesitate, doesn't bargain, doesn't ask for names in exchange for honesty. The Hollow Shepherd was the thing that hunted gods like me. It explains, its voice low and strangely fragile. It didn't devour names. It devoured entire existences. My tribe, the one that bonded with me first, the one that vanished within a year, didn't erase themselves by accident. The shepherd erased them and blamed it on me. For centuries I've carried the guilt buried under stone, forgotten exactly the way the shepherd wanted, while the real monster wandered free, hunting, waiting, patient. So when you say the wolves come on the new moon, It continues quietly. I fear the wolves are simply what the shepherd sends ahead, the way a hunter sends hounds first. That single piece of information changes everything about tomorrow night, and I spend the rest of the darkness not sleeping, just thinking, planning, recalculating. If the wolves are only the opening act, then surviving them isn't victory. It's just the first test before something far older and far hungrier finally arrives. At dawn, I tell Chief Dorn everything Orla and the corpse god revealed. Watching his weathered face age another decade in the span of a single conversation. A god-eating god, he repeats slowly, like saying it twice might somehow make the sentence smaller, less terrifying, more manageable for a man already drowning in preparation. We prepare for what we can prepare for, I tell him firmly, because panic helps nobody, and right now this tribe needs steadiness more than it needs another reason to despair. Dorn nods, swallowing whatever fear sits behind his eyes, and calls one final council meeting before the new moon rises over the mountains tonight. The watchtowers hold extra archers. The pack formations get reassigned to cover wider ground. Every able body over 14 winters gets handed a weapon and a position. Braca, to his credit, stops mocking long enough to actually take his assigned post seriously, standing at the western wall with a spear grip tighter than I've ever seen him hold anything. Maybe fear does that to people. Strips away the performance and leaves only whatever's actually underneath. And underneath Braca's cruelty, there's apparently just another scared boy. As the sun finally sinks behind the western peaks, the entire camp falls into the kind of silence that only exists right before something irreversible begins. I find my position near the northern pass, exactly where I died last lifetime. Exactly where 400 feet wasn't nearly far enough to outrun a starving wolf. This time, I'm not running anywhere. And this time, something ancient and patient sits coiled inside my chest, finally ready to remember exactly what it used to be. The first howl breaks across the mountainside just as the new moon clears the peaks, and every torch in camp flickers like the darkness itself just leaned in closer. Then the second howl answers, and the third, and within minutes the entire northern tree line erupts with shapes too large, too fast, too hungry to be ordinary wolves. Last lifetime, that sound alone sent me running. This lifetime, I plant my spear in the dirt, feel the mark on my arm burn white hot, and finally let the devourer awaken fully. Names. It whispers one final time, almost gentle now, almost grateful. Whose name do you offer me first, little vessel, to begin tonight's reckoning? None of theirs, I answer, watching the first bloodfang wolf break from the tree line in a dead sprint toward the wall. Tonight, you finally get to remember your own. The corpse god goes utterly silent for one heartbeat, stunned in a way 3 centuries of buried hunger apparently never prepared it to feel. And then it screams with something close to joy. And somewhere behind that wave of wolves, deeper in the mountain dark, something far larger finally begins, slowly, patiently, to descend toward the camp it once hunted from the shadows. The first wolf hits the wall exactly where I'm standing, jaws wide, claws already extended, moving with the same terrifying speed I remember from the night I died. This time, though, I don't flinch backward. I step into it, spear angled low exactly the way Vass taught me, and feel the impact rattle up through both my arms. The wolf yelps, stumbling sideways, and before it can recover, the mark on my arm flares white and the devourer of names finally takes its very first taste of this new life. It doesn't take the wolf's name, because beasts don't carry true names the way people do. Instead, it takes something simpler. Its fear, its hunger, its will to keep fighting. The wolf collapses mid-snarl, suddenly hollow-eyed and docile, like a puppet whose strings just got cut clean by something it never even saw coming. Interesting, the corpse god murmurs, almost delighted. I forgot I could do that, borrowing instead of devouring. You really are teaching this old god new tricks. Around me, the battle erupts into full chaos, torches swinging, spears thrusting. The night air filling with snarls and shouted warnings and the occasional scream cut short. Braca, to my genuine surprise, holds his section of the western wall with something close to actual competence, driving back to wolves with brutal, efficient spear work. Maybe 3 years of preparation changed more than just the walls and watchtowers, I think. Watching the chief's son fight like someone who finally has something worth protecting. Vass fights beside me despite his missing arm, using the stump itself as a brutal counterbalance, knocking wolves off stride just long enough for his spear hand to finish the job. For nearly an hour, the tribe holds the line, exhausted but unbroken, and for the first time in either of my lives, it actually feels like we might survive this night together. Then the howling stops, all at once, the entire tree line going eerily silent. and every remaining wolf turns and flees back into the darkness, like something far worse just arrived. The corpse god goes rigid inside my chest, every trace of playful confidence gone in an instant, replaced by something I've never felt from it before. Genuine fear. It's here. It whispers, and the ground itself seems to shudder in agreement. A low groaning tremor that sends loose stones tumbling down from the northern watchtower. From the tree line emerges something that doesn't walk so much as unfold. Limb after impossible limb extending out of shadow that shouldn't be able to hold a shape at all. The hollow shepherd doesn't roar. It doesn't howl. It simply exists, and the sheer wrongness of its presence makes every torch in camp flicker toward darkness instead of light. Chief Dorn shouts orders, trying to hold formation, but I can already see it in the eyes of every hunter nearby. This isn't a fight anyone trained 3 years to survive. Vessel, the shepherd says, and the word arrives not through sound, but directly inside my skull. The exact same way the corpse god first spoke to me at the naming fire. You carry my old prey. It continues, somehow amused despite having no visible mouth, no visible face, nothing but shifting shadows shaped vaguely like patience itself. I have hunted that hunger for 3 centuries across forgotten years and forgotten names. Hand it over, little human, and I will leave the rest of your insignificant tribe untouched. The corpse god flares hot and desperate inside my ribs, and for one terrifying second I genuinely don't know whether it's begging me to surrender it, or begging me not to. Last lifetime, I would have already collapsed from fear alone, would have already accepted any bargain that promised survival, would have already failed everyone counting on me. This lifetime, I plant my spear in the dirt one more time. Feel 3 years of training settle into my spine and look directly into the shifting, hungry shadow of a god-eating god. You erased an entire tribe and blamed it on the thing you were hunting, I say loudly. Loud enough for Dorn and Orla and Vass and even Braca to hear every word clearly. You've spent 3 centuries letting an innocent hunger carry your crime, so nobody ever came looking for the real monster. That instant night, whether you leave or not, the hollow shepherd goes very still, and for the briefest moment, I swear the shifting shadow almost flickers with something like surprise, like it's never once been accused before. Bold words from prey. It finally says, the shadow rippling forward with sudden, terrifying speed, and the corpse god inside my chest screams one single command. Now, if you've made it this far, drop a comment telling me which totem you'd want bonded to you, because trust me, you really do not want the forgotten one. Now, it isn't a request. It's the closest thing the corpse god has to a battle cry, and the second it leaves my chest, the mark on my arm detonates into light. Black fire erupts from my skin, not burning, just devouring. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the devourer of names finally remembers what it used to be. The hollow shepherd surges forward in a wave of shifting shadow, fast enough to close the gap between us before most hunters could even raise their spears. I don't try to dodge. Last lifetime taught me running never wins anything. This lifetime, I plant my feet and let 3 years of training meet 3 centuries of hatred head on. The impact should kill me instantly. Instead, the black fire wraps around my spear like armor, and the shepherd's shadow limb shatters against it with a sound like breaking glass. The shepherd recoils, genuinely startled, its shapeless form flickering with something almost like pain, almost like it's never once been heard by prey before. You shouldn't be capable of that. It hisses directly into my skull, and I can feel the corpse god inside my chest practically vibrating with vicious satisfaction. 3 centuries of guilt makes a vessel desperate, I answer, repeating words Vass once told me about cornered animals. Desperate things hit harder than confident ones. Behind me, Chief Dorn shouts something I can't fully hear over the roar of black fire, and Orla's staff slams into the dirt, channeling whatever protective magic the tribe still remembers. Braca, against every expectation I had for him, charges forward to cover my flank, spear raised, face white with terror, but feet refusing to retreat an inch. You don't have to do this, I tell him quickly, parrying another shadow strike. This isn't your fight. You don't owe this tribe anything you haven't already given. Shut up and fight, forgotten boy. He snaps back, and for the first time in either of my lives, there's no cruelty in his voice at all, just fear and stubborn loyalty. The hollow shepherd lashes out again, faster this time, and one shadow limb catches Braca across the chest, throwing him backward into the dirt with a sickening thud. Last lifetime, I watched my cousin die exactly like this while doing nothing. This lifetime, the corpse god and I move as one single motion before I even consciously decide to. Black fire erupts from my outstretched palm, slamming into the shepherd's extended limb, and for the first time tonight, the ancient predator actually screams. It's not pain exactly, it's recognition. The shepherd finally understands that the hunger it spent 3 centuries hunting has grown into something it can no longer simply erase. You cannot win this, the shepherd snarls, shadow rippling with sudden violence, limbs multiplying faster than my eyes can track in the flickering torchlight. Maybe not alone, I admit, and for the first time, I let go of the idea that this fight was ever supposed to be just me against 3 centuries of buried godly trauma. Vass arrives at my left side, spear already swinging, striking at any shadow limb that gets too close, while I focus everything on holding the shepherd's attention. Orla's staff glows gold, the old naming magic finally remembering its original purpose, weaving a barrier of light around the wounded hunters still scattered across the field. Even Dorn, despite being chief and despite having no totem mark of his own, throws himself into the fray, dragging Bracca's unconscious body back behind the barrier's edge. This entire tribe spent 19 years calling me forgotten, and tonight every single one of them is bleeding and fighting beside the boy they once refused to feed first. Something about that realization burns hotter inside my chest than even the black fire, and the corpse god, sensing the shift, finally offers me something it's never offered before. Take my name, it says quietly, almost reverently. Not borrow it, take it fully. Let me finally become something other than a buried mistake hiding inside a forgotten stone. I hesitate, because taking a god's actual name feels like a door that might never close again. But the shepherd's shadow surges forward and the choice stops being theoretical. I accept, I say, and the moment the words leave my mouth, the mark on my arm stops being a mark at all and becomes something closer to a second heartbeat inside my chest. The black fire doesn't just wrap around my spear anymore. It becomes my spear, becomes my arm, becomes an extension of will sharp enough to cut through shadow itself. The hollow shepherd's next strike doesn't shatter against me. It simply stops existing the moment it touches the black fire, erased clean the same way it once erased an entire tribe. For the first time tonight, the ancient predator actually retreats, shadow limbs withdrawing, shapeless form curling defensively away from the boy it called insignificant minutes ago. Impossible, it whispers, and I can hear something close to genuine fear bleeding into that single word. No vessel has ever survived a full union. None. Ever. None of your previous vessels trained 3 years for this fight either, I answer, advancing slowly, deliberately, refusing to let 3 centuries of dread dictate this moment. The shepherd tries one final desperate strategy, splitting itself into a dozen smaller shadow forms, scattering across the battlefield to attack the wounded hunters directly. Clever, I think, watching the swarm spread toward Orla's barrier, toward Vass, toward Bracca's still unconscious body lying exposed near the broken western wall. Not clever enough, the corpse god murmurs through our shared consciousness, and together we move faster than either of us could have alone 3 years ago. Black fire spreads from my chest outward in a wave, not aimed at any single shadow fragment, but at all of them simultaneously, calling each fragment by a name it never wanted spoken aloud. Hollow shepherd, I say, and the name itself becomes a weapon. Every fragment freezing mid-strike as the totem inside me finally claims the name that hunted it for 3 centuries. The shadow fragments collapse inward, drawn helplessly back toward their source, and the original hollow shepherd shrieks as its own stolen strategy gets turned completely against it. This is what you feared the whole time, isn't it? I say quietly, walking toward the collapsing shadow with black fire still curling lazily around my outstretched palm. Not that I'd survive. That I'd survive and still remember exactly who you were raised to keep your own crime buried for 3 centuries while an innocent hunger took the blame instead. The hollow shepherd doesn't answer. It can't, not really, not anymore. Its form already dissolving into smaller and smaller fragments under the weight of its own true name. In its final moment, it does something I never expect from 3 centuries of calculated cruelty. It simply goes still, almost peaceful, like something exhausted from running too long. Finally, it whispers, so quiet only I can hear it. Finally something remembers what I actually did. Tell them, don't let them forget this time either. Then it's gone, completely, utterly gone. The shadow dissolving into the night air like smoke caught by wind, leaving only silence and torchlight and the smell of scorched earth. For a long moment, nobody moves, nobody speaks. The entire tribe just stands there, staring at the empty space where an ancient god-eating god used to exist, breathing in disbelief. Then Chief Dorn, blood-streaked and exhausted, drops to one knee in the dirt. And somehow that single gesture says more than any speech he could have given afterward. Orla follows next, her staff finally lowering, and one by one, hunters and elders and children alike sink down around me, in a silence too heavy for words to properly fill. Braca, conscious again, but barely standing, looks at me across the battlefield with an expression I genuinely never expected to see on his face. In either of my lives, not jealousy, not mockery, just plain, uncomplicated gratitude. The kind that doesn't care about totem rank or family name or any of the things that mattered before tonight. You actually did it, he says, voice rough with exhaustion. Forgotten Totem Boy actually saved the entire tribe. Never going to hear the end of how wrong I was, am I? Probably not, I tell him honestly, and for the first time in either of my lives. We both actually laugh, tired and shaky but real, the way survivors laugh after surviving. The corpse god, now fully part of me rather than a separate voice in my chest, settles into something quieter, calmer, like an ancient weight finally allowed to rest. Thank you, it murmurs one final time before fading into the background of my own thoughts. 3 centuries of forgotten guilt, and you're the first vessel who ever asked what I actually wanted. What did you actually want? I ask silently, genuinely curious now that the battle's finally over and there's room in my head for questions, instead of just survival. To be remembered honestly, it answers simply, not as a monster, not as a hero, just as what I actually was. A god who made one terrible mistake and paid for it for 300 years. I think I can manage that, I tell it, and somewhere deep inside my own chest, something ancient and tired finally relaxes after 3 centuries of carrying buried weight alone. Dawn arrives slowly over the mountains, painting the battlefield in gentle gold light that feels almost cruel against the scorched earth and broken walls scattered across the camp. The tribe spends the morning counting losses, tending wounds, and slowly, carefully, beginning to process exactly what survived the night and exactly what didn't make it through. 12 hunters die holding the western wall. 3 children lost to the initial wolf charge before the watchtowers could properly respond. Losses, but nowhere close to last lifetime's devastation. Last lifetime, the entire tribe burned. This lifetime, grief sits heavy, but survivable. The difference between a wound that scars and a wound that simply ends everything. Chief Dorn calls a gathering at midday, exhausted but standing, and for the first time in 3 years, he doesn't ask the council for opinions before speaking his own. The Forgotten Totem just saved every single person standing in this circle, he announces, his voice carrying clearly across the battered camp. That title ends today, permanently. From this day forward, he continues, looking directly at me. This tribe names you Kellen the Unforgotten, keeper of the totem that remembers what this whole world tried to erase. The crowd doesn't laugh this time. Nobody mutters about cripples or curses or jokes hiding in stone. They just watch, quiet and respectful, finally seeing exactly who I actually am. It's strange, standing in the same fire circle where they once scratched my name off a totem pole, now hearing an entirely different name spoken with something close to reverence. Last lifetime, I died running from this exact spot. This lifetime, I'm standing in it, being given a new name by the same chief who once let me sleep outside in the dirt. Vass approaches afterward, his crooked smile a little wider than usual, and claps his remaining hand against my shoulder with enough force to nearly knock me sideways. To cripples teaching each other to die slower, he says, repeating Braca's old insult with obvious amusement. Turns out we just taught each other to survive instead. Not bad for cripples. Orla approaches next, studying my face with a careful attention priestesses reserve for things they're still trying to fully understand even after witnessing them firsthand. The mark has changed, she observes quietly, gesturing toward my arm where the jagged black lines have softened into something resembling actual totem markings instead of a curse. I think it finally remembers what it's supposed to look like, I tell her, flexing my fingers and feeling the quiet, subtle presence of the corpse god resting comfortably inside me. Word of the battle spreads faster than any rumor Braca ever started, traveling through trading routes and neighboring camps, until even rival tribes start asking about the Unforgotten Boy. Within weeks, hunters from smaller, struggling camps start arriving at our gates, asking quietly, almost desperately, whether the totem boy who beat a god might be willing to teach them something. I never planned to become anyone's teacher. Last lifetime, I barely survived as a forgotten errand boy. This lifetime, apparently, survival just keeps escalating into something larger. Chief Dorn, ever practical, sees opportunity where I initially see only confusion. Strength like yours shouldn't stay locked inside one tribe, he tells me one evening by the fire. Other tribes are weak because nobody ever taught their forgotten ones what you learned from a one-armed hunter nobody respected. Maybe it's time someone finally did. The idea unsettles me at first, mostly because last lifetime taught me trust gets people killed. But this lifetime keeps reminding me that isolation is exactly what almost erased this entire tribe. So when the first small group of outcasts arrives, 3 teenagers from a neighboring camp who'd been mocked for weak totems exactly the way I once was mocked for mine, I don't turn them away. Their names are Scylla, a girl bonded to a totem everyone called the drowned frog, Totem, bonded to something called the rusted plow, and Yenna, bonded to nothing visible at all. 3 totems considered worthless by every tribe that ever judged them. Standing nervously at my gate, clearly expecting another door to slam shut in their exhausted, hopeful faces, I look at each of them, remembering exactly what it felt like standing at that fire pit 19 years into a forgotten life nobody believed would ever amount to anything. Come inside, I tell them, and watch 3 years of accumulated disbelief slowly crack across their faces. The same disbelief I once wore every single day before the wolves finally came. Vast takes one look at the newcomers and lets out a short, knowing laugh. Looks like the cripples just became teachers after all, he says, already reaching for training spears. Over the following weeks, I start teaching exactly what Vast taught me. Shoulders, not teeth. Patience, not panic. The value of training a body even when a god sits ready inside your chest. Scylla's drowned frog totem, it turns out, isn't worthless at all once properly understood. It's a totem built entirely around water manipulation that her old tribe simply never bothered exploring. Tomek's rusted plow totem channels raw destructive force through ordinary tools, meaning his battered farming hoe becomes something genuinely terrifying once he learns how to actually use it. Yenna's invisible totem turns out to be the strangest discovery of all. A totem so quiet and unassuming that nobody, including her own tribe, ever noticed it was bonded to silence itself. Silence, when properly trained, becomes something closer to a weapon than anyone expects, allowing her to move and strike without a single totem spirit ever sensing her approach. 3 forgotten totems, 3 forgotten teenagers, and within 2 months, all 3 start displaying abilities their previous tribe spent years insisting were worthless beyond saving. Word spreads further. More outcasts arrive. By the end of the season, what started as a quiet personal favor to 3 nervous teenagers becomes something closer to an actual school. The chosen disciples of the unforgotten totem, people start calling them, and I notice the title makes Silas stand a little straighter every single time someone says it within earshot. Bracca, surprisingly, asked to help train the newcomers in basic weapon forms, claiming it's purely practical since someone needs to teach proper spear technique before totems even matter. I suspect it's actually guilt working its way slowly out of him. 3 years of mockery finally finding somewhere productive to redirect itself, instead of staying buried and bitter. Either way, I let him help, because last lifetime taught me that holding grudges against people who eventually change just wastes energy better spent preparing for whatever comes next. And something does come next, sooner than I expect, in the form of a messenger arriving breathless at our gates exactly 6 months after the Hollow Shepherd's final scream faded into silence. A rider from the Stonebridge tribe, 3 days south, claims they've discovered a totem stone identical to mine buried beneath the collapsed ridge. After recent flooding exposed old ground, my chest goes tight immediately. The settled presence of the corpse god suddenly alert again, recognizing something in the messenger's description that I haven't yet consciously processed myself. There's more than one devourer of names, the corpse god murmurs quietly inside my thoughts. Something between concern and old, buried dread coloring every word it offers. What do you mean more than one? I asked silently, feeling a cold unease settle exactly where relief had finally started building. Over the past peaceful 6 months, the Hollow Shepherd didn't hunt just me. It explained slowly, like recalling something painful it spent 3 centuries trying not to remember at all. There were others like me, siblings, almost, if the shepherd is truly gone. And one of my forgotten siblings has just been uncovered after centuries buried beneath Stonebridge soil. There is no telling what state it might wake up in. Last lifetime, I never knew any of this existed. This lifetime, I'm standing at my own gate again, except this time, I'm not running toward survival. I'm walking toward whatever comes next on purpose. Scylla, Tomek, and Yenna gather behind me, totems flickering with newly trained confidence, and for the first time, I realize I'm not facing whatever's buried at Stonebridge entirely alone anymore. 3 days south, the messenger repeats, clearly exhausted from the ride, clearly hoping the famous unforgotten boy has some immediate answer for a problem his own tribe can't begin to understand. I look back at Chief Dorn, who simply nods, already understanding exactly what needs to happen next without requiring a single additional word of explanation between us. Pack supplies, I tell my 3 disciples, watching determination settle across faces that 3 months ago belonged to outcasts nobody believed could ever amount to anything worthwhile. We leave for Stonebridge at dawn, I announce, and somewhere deep in my chest, the settled weight of an ancient, forgiven God stirs with something that feels remarkably close to anticipation. The journey south takes 3 full days, mostly through dense pine forest broken occasionally by rocky ridgelines that remind me uncomfortably of the mountain pass where I died once already. Silas spends most of the walk practicing small water manipulations on every stream we cross, coaxing droplets into shapes that grow steadier and more controlled with every passing hour. Totem carries his battered farming hoe like it's already a weapon worth respecting, occasionally testing small destructive pulses against fallen logs, just to feel the totem settle properly. Yenna walks ahead of the group most of the time, silent as always, and twice I lose track of her presence entirely despite knowing exactly where she's supposed to be standing. You're getting better at that, I tell her the second time it happens, and she allows herself the smallest, rarest smile I've seen cross her face since she first arrived at our gate. My old tribe called this totem useless because it never showed power the way fire or strength shows power, she says quietly. They never once considered that quiet itself could be a weapon. Most weak totems aren't actually weak, I tell her, repeating something Vass once told me during a particularly frustrating training session months earlier. They're just badly understood. On the second night, camped beneath a rocky overhang, the corpse god grows unusually talkative, sharing fragmented memories of its siblings from before the Hollow Shepherd hunted them down. There were 7 of us originally, it explains, voice heavy with old grief finally allowed to surface after centuries of forced silence. Devourers of different things, names, memory, regret, sorrow. The shepherd hunted us one by one. It continues, framing each death as a mercy, a cleansing, a necessary erasure of dangerous gods who threaten the natural order of forgetting. What did the Stonebridge totem devour? I ask carefully, watching firelight flicker across my disciples' sleeping faces while they rest before tomorrow's final stretch of travel. I don't know, it admits honestly. We were scattered and buried before I learned all their names. But if it's been buried as long as I was, whatever wakes up will likely be furious and frightened. That combination sounds dangerous, I think privately, recalling exactly how dangerous my own buried fury and fear once made me. Before 3 years of training gave both somewhere productive to go, on the morning of the 3rd day, we finally crest the last ridge overlooking Stonebridge territory, and the devastation below makes my stomach drop before anyone speaks a single word. Half the camp lies in ruins, collapsed structures scattered across churned earth, and even from this distance I can see survivors moving slowly between wreckage, with the particular exhaustion of recent disaster. This wasn't flooding, Tomek says grimly, gripping his hoe tighter as we descend the ridge toward the broken settlement below. Floods don't tear buildings apart like something clawed through them. A Stonebridge elder meets us at the edge of camp, her face hollow with exhaustion and grief, and her eyes widen with desperate recognition the moment she registers my totem mark. You're the unforgotten boy, she says, voice cracking with relief so sudden it sounds almost painful. Please, whatever woke up beneath the ridge, it's already taken 11 of our people. Show me exactly where you found the stone, I tell her, and she leads us through the ruined camp toward a collapsed hillside where broken earth still steams faintly in the cool morning air. The totem stone itself sits cracked open at the center of a crater nearly 30 feet wide, far larger than the modest crack my own totem left behind during my naming ceremony years ago. Whatever emerged from the stone clearly didn't emerge gently, and the destruction radiating outward from the crater tells a story of panic and violence rather than careful, controlled awakening. Scylla crouches near the crater's edge, studying churned mud and broken stone with an intensity that surprises me, given how quiet she's remained for most of our journey south. Whatever did this moved fast and low, she observes, tracing drag marks through the mud with one careful finger, like something that doesn't trust its own legs yet. Newly woken, maybe. That matches what the corpse god told me, I say aloud for the others to hear, sharing fragments of last night's conversation about the 7 original Devour siblings and their scattered burials. Yenna goes very still, head tilted slightly. The particular stillness I've learned means she's noticed something the rest of us haven't yet registered through ordinary senses alone. It's close, she whispers. Whatever this thing is, it's still here. watching us right now from somewhere in those tree-lined shadows just past the ruined eastern wall. The corpse god inside my chest flares with sudden recognition. Something between dread and desperate hope tangled together in a way that makes my own pulse quicken without fully understanding why. "Sister," it whispers, the word arriving with such raw emotion that I nearly stumble mid-step. That's my sister out there, the devourer of sorrow. I thought she died centuries ago alongside everyone else. I skin the tree line carefully, totem mark warming against my skin, and slowly, painfully slowly, something detaches itself from the deep shadow between the broken pine trees at the forest edge. It doesn't look like a god. It looks like a girl, maybe 16 winters old, hollow-eyed and trembling, her skin marked with the same jagged black lines that once covered my own forearm. She doesn't speak. She just stares at me, and at the mark on my arm, with an expression caught somewhere between recognition and absolute, bone-deep terror that makes my chest ache watching it. "Easy," I say softly, raising both hands slowly, the way Vass once taught me to approach a wounded animal that doesn't yet understand you're trying to help rather than hurt it. "My name is Kellen," I tell her gently. "I carry your brother. He's been waiting a long time to know whether any of his siblings survived what the Hollow Shepherd did to all of you." At the word brother, something shifts behind her hollow eyes, the trembling slowing slightly, though the terror doesn't fully disappear, just settles into something closer to cautious disbelief. "The shepherd," she finally whispers, voice cracked from what sounds like centuries of disuse. "Is it dead? Tell me honestly. I won't trust anything less than complete honesty right now." "Dead," I confirm. 3 nights ago, north of here. I helped end it personally, with your brother's full strength fighting alongside me the entire time it took to finally finish things. She collapses to her knees in the mud, and the 11 deaths surrounding her sudden awakening suddenly make painful, awful sense. Not malice, just blind, terrified panic from something newly freed. "I didn't mean to hurt them," she says, voice breaking completely now. "I woke up and everything was screaming and burning and I didn't know what was happening or who was attacking me. Last lifetime, I understand panic exactly that deeply. The kind that makes you run for 100 feet through darkness without ever once considering who might get hurt in your wake. This isn't your fault entirely," I tell her honestly, kneeling down to her level despite Sila's nervous warning glance from somewhere behind me, near the crater's broken edge. "You woke up alone after centuries of forced burial, surrounded by strangers, with no idea whether the thing that haunted you and your siblings was still alive and hunting still. That's not malice. That's survival instinct with absolutely nowhere safe to direct itself. Exactly the kind of mistake any newly awakened, terrified creature might make under those circumstances." The Stonebridge elder behind me makes a small, strangled sound of protest, clearly struggling to reconcile sympathy for a terrified girl with grief for 11 dead members of her own tribe. "I understand your anger," I tell the elder honestly, turning to face her directly. 11 deaths deserve grief and deserve answers, but vengeance against a panicked, newly woken god helps nobody heal. "What do you propose instead?" the elder demands, voice tight with barely controlled fury despite obvious exhaustion weighing down every word. She manages to force out, "I propose she comes with us," I say, gesturing to my 3 disciples standing carefully nearby. "She learns control, the way Sila and Tomek and Yenna learned control, the way I learned control, and in exchange," I continue, choosing my next words carefully, "she helps rebuild what fear damaged here, working alongside Stonebridge survivors instead of running from the consequences entirely." The girl, still kneeling in the mud, looks up at me with something between disbelief and desperate, fragile hope, the same exact expression I remember wearing the morning after my own naming ceremony. "You'd actually trust me with that?" she asks quietly, and I recognize the question underneath the question, the same one I once silently asked Vass during our very first training session together. "I trust people who are honest about their fear more than people who pretend they never had any," I tell her, extending one hand down toward the mud where she's still kneeling, shaking, uncertain. After a long moment, she reaches up and takes it, and the corpse god inside my chest practically sings, with something I've genuinely never felt from it before across our entire shared existence. Joy, her name, once she finally manages to share it through still shaking breath, turns out to be Marin, and the totem she carries calls itself simply the Devourer of Sorrow, exactly as the corpse god remembered. Together, we spend the next weeks helping Stonebridge rebuild, Marin working alongside survivors under careful supervision while slowly, painfully learning to control centuries of buried grief. The elder never fully forgives, and I don't expect her to. But by the time we finally prepare to leave, she at least offers Marin a formal nod of cautious, conditional acceptance. That's more than I ever got my entire first lifetime, I think. Watching the small gesture land heavily on Marin's exhausted, grateful face beside the half-rebuilt eastern wall, as we finally prepare to travel home, the corpse god grows quiet again, thoughtful in a way I'm starting to recognize means something larger is forming, and whatever passes for its consciousness. 5 siblings remain unaccounted for, it tells me eventually, as our small group wends back north through familiar pine forest toward home, and whatever waits for us their necks. If the shepherd truly hunted and buried all 7 of us across scattered locations, the other 5 are out there somewhere too, waiting, forgotten, possibly far more dangerous than Marin turned out to be. I look back at my expanding group of disciples, Sila and Tomek and Yenna, and now Marin. For forgotten things slowly becoming something the world once insisted could never matter at all. Last lifetime, I died alone on a mountainside, forgotten and unmourned. This lifetime, apparently, I'm slowly building an entire family out of everything the world threw away as worthless. We'll find them, I tell the corpse god firmly, feeling something settle into permanent resolve somewhere deep beneath my ribs. Every single forgotten sibling you have left out there. And this time, I add silently, we won't let anyone, god or tribe or ancient hunting shadow, decide their worth before they ever get a fair chance to actually prove it themselves. 3 days later, exhausted but intact, our group finally crests the final ridge overlooking home, and the familiar sight of Dorn's longhouse smoke curling skyward feels better than I expect. Chief Dorn meets us at the gate personally, studying Marin's hollow eyes and trembling shoulders with the same careful judgment. He once aimed at me before deciding to trust my warnings years ago. Another one, he says, not quite a question. Already understanding exactly what's happened based purely on the totem mark, visible along Marin's forearm beneath her torn, travel-worn sleeve. Another one, I confirm. And if the corpse god's memory holds true, she won't be the last forgotten totem we bring through these gates before this is finally completely over. Dorn studies the growing group behind me. For disciples now, where once there was only a single forgotten boy nobody bothered feeding first. At the evening fire pit, this tribe keeps growing stranger every season, he finally says. Though there's no complaint in his voice anymore, only the tired, genuine warmth of a chief who's learned to trust strange things. That night, around the same fire pit where they once scratched my name off a totem pole, Marin sits quietly beside Sila, sharing careful, hesitant conversation about totems and control and survival. Watching them, I feel the corpse god settle deeper into something like peace. 3 centuries of buried guilt finally finding somewhere productive to rest, besides the cold weight of forgotten stone. But peace, I'm learning fast, never lasts particularly long when you're carrying a god that 5 separate ancient siblings are still scattered and waiting to be found across the wider, hungrier world. 2 weeks after Marin's arrival, a second messenger arrives at our gates, this one from a trading post nearly 2 weeks' travel east, carrying rumors of a totem stone that screams instead of cracking. A totem that screams isn't a totem at all in most traditions, Orla says carefully when I bring her the rumor, studying old scrolls with a particular intensity she reserves for genuine dread. That sounds less like awakening and more like suffering, I say quietly, feeling the corpse god flare with sudden recognition again, the same dreadful certainty it showed before Marin's discovery. Sorrow woke up frightened, it tells me grimly, if something is screaming instead of simply cracking open. Whatever sibling rests inside the particular stone has been suffering far longer than Marin ever did. I look at Sila, Tomek, Yenna, and Marin, all for watching me with expressions that mix exhaustion with stubborn, growing determination. The same determination I once found standing alone at a fire pit. Back again, I tell them, feeling the weight of an entirely new journey settling across shoulders that have barely finished, resting from the last one we just completed together. Whatever's screaming out there, I add quietly, mostly to myself, deserves the same chance Marin got. The chance nobody ever gave the forgotten totem boy until he was already 19 years dead. The journey east takes nearly 2 weeks, longer than Stonebridge, mostly because the trading post sending rumors sits past 3 separate river crossings and 1 genuinely miserable mountain pass. Sila spends most of the river crossings testing how far her water manipulation extends, eventually managing to part shallow currents just enough for the rest of us to cross, without soaking our packs. Tomek uses the mountain pass as an excuse to test his rusted plow totem against actual stone, carving small handholds into the cliff face. That make the climb considerably less miserable for everyone. Marin stays quiet for most of the journey, still adjusting to a body that's only weeks old despite carrying centuries of buried memory. But she stopped flinching every time someone speaks to loudly nearby. Yenna, predictably, scouts ahead in near total silence, returning periodically to report terrain and danger with the efficient brevity of someone who's learned that words cost more than they're worth. The Corp Scout stays unusually tense throughout the entire trip, occasionally murmuring fragments of old memory about its missing siblings, none of them especially comforting to hear in detail. The devourer of sorrow suffered alone in the dark for 3 centuries. It tells me one evening by the fire, if something out there is screaming, I genuinely fear what kind of suffering created that sound. We reached the trading post on the 14th day, a sprawling collection of wooden stalls and temporary shelters built around a natural crossroads, where for different trade routes intersect. The post elder, a weary man named Kasich who's clearly built his entire reputation on knowing every rumor passing through his crossroads, meets us before we've even fully entered the settlement proper. You're the unforgotten group, he says immediately, eyes flicking across our totem marks with obvious recognition. Word travels fast on trade routes, faster than most tribes ever expect. Tell me about the Screaming Stone, I say, skipping past pleasantries entirely. And something in my tone makes Kasich's easy trading smile fade into something considerably more serious. It's not here exactly, he admits, leading us toward a quieter section of the crossroads. It's 3 days further east, and territory the Hollow Reach tribe controls. They've been guarding it jealously. Guarding it how? I ask, feeling the corpse god flare with renewed unease at the word guarding. An unease that suggests guarding might mean something considerably darker than simple protection. Kasich lowers his voice further. Rumor says the Hollow Reach elders discovered the stone years ago and never let it crack open. Naturally, they keep it sealed, feeding it small offerings to control whatever's inside. That's not guarding, Tomek says grimly, gripping his hoe tighter at the implication. That's imprisonment. Whatever sibling is in that stone has spent years being deliberately, carefully contained. The corpse god goes utterly silent inside my chest, and the silence itself tells me everything I need to know about how furious 3 centuries of buried godhood feels about deliberate imprisonment. Why would they keep it sealed instead of letting it bond naturally? I ask, though some cold part of me already suspects the answer before Kasich even finishes formulating his careful response. Power? Kasich says simply. A sealed totem stone radiates raw spiritual energy outward continuously. The Hollow Reach elders have been harvesting that energy for years to strengthen their own bloodline totems. They're farming a god suffering for personal gain. Silas says quietly, disgust clear in every word, and I notice Marin's hands have started trembling again for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. Last lifetime, I understand exactly what it feels like being treated as a resource instead of a person, being kept just barely functional enough to remain useful, without ever being allowed to actually thrive. This lifetime, hearing that someone's doing the same thing deliberately, calculatedly, to an imprisoned god, lights something cold and absolutely certain inside my chest that wasn't quite there before now. We're going to Hollow Reach territory, I announce, and nobody in my group argues. Though Kasich's expression suggests he genuinely expected us to reconsider after hearing exactly how dangerous the tribe is, they won't welcome strangers asking about their sealed totem. He warns, the Hollow Reach elders are protective of their resources, and lately, increasingly hostile toward outsiders who ask too many questions. We're not strangers asking questions, I tell him. We're the people coming to make sure that resource finally gets treated like the suffering god it actually is instead of a tool for somebody else's power. Kasich studies me for a long moment, then sighs and pulls a worn trade map from his pack, marking a careful route that avoids the Hollow Reach's main patrol paths through the eastern hill country. This gets you close without drawing immediate attention, he says, handing over the map. After that, whatever happens is entirely your own decision to make, and entirely your own consequences to carry. We thank him and set out the following morning, following Kasich's careful route through hill country thick with low scrub brush and the occasional abandoned watchtower from some long-forgotten border dispute. By the second day, Yenna returns from scouting with news that makes the entire group go quiet. She's found the totem stone, sealed inside a stone vault at the center of the Hollow Reach settlement. It's screaming constantly, she reports, voice carefully controlled despite obvious distress. Not loud, just constant, like something that forgot screaming was ever supposed to eventually stop. The corpse god flares with sudden, desperate recognition. That sounds like Turin, it says quietly. The devourer of despair. Of all my siblings, Turin always carried suffering closest to the surface. If they've kept Turin sealed in suffering for years, I say carefully. Feeling cold resolve settled deeper into my chest. Then whatever we're about to do in that settlement, I'm not planning on being gentle about it. We approach Hollow Reach territory under cover of darkness. Yenna's careful scouting, having mapped patrol routes thoroughly enough that we slip past the outer watch post without raising any immediate alarm. The settlement itself sits built around a central stone vault exactly as Yenna described. Timber walls reinforced with iron, clearly designed to contain something far stronger than ordinary locks could manage. Even from outside the vault, I can feel it now, faint and constant. A low vibration of suffering radiating outward like heat from a fire that's been burning unattended for far too many years straight. Scylla presses her palm against the vault's outer wall, face tightening with something close to physical pain. I can feel the harvesting, she whispers. They've got channels running energy straight from the stone. Tomek traces one such channel with his eyes, following thin metal conduits running from the vault toward a cluster of larger longhouses near the settlement's center, presumably where the elders themselves reside. They've built their entire bloodline strength on someone else's suffering, he says quietly, disgust in every syllable, and for once nobody in our group disagrees with the bitterness in his voice. Before we can plan our next move carefully, a voice cuts sharply through the darkness behind us. Confident and clearly accustomed to command, strangers don't wander Hollow Reach territory uninvited. We turn to find a woman flanked by 6 armed guards, her bearing radiating the particular authority of someone who's spent years being obeyed, without ever once needing to ask twice for compliance. I am Elder Vashti, she announces, studying our totem marks with obvious calculation, and you are. Clearly the unforgotten group everyone's been whispering about across half the eastern trade routes. Lately, we're here for the seal totem, I tell her directly, seeing no advantage in pretending otherwise now that we've already been discovered standing directly outside her tribe's most valuable possession. Vashti's expression doesn't shift at all, though something calculating flickers briefly behind her eyes. That totem belongs to Hollow Reach, she says flatly, found on our land, sealed by our ancestors' wisdom. That totem is a suffering god you've been deliberately harvesting for years, I answer, refusing to soften the accusation despite 6 armed guards, now shifting their weight in obvious readiness. Around us, suffering is irrelevant when survival is at stake, Vashti says coldly. Hollow Reach was dying of drought before our ancestors discovered the stone's power. The totem's suffering bought our tribe's survival. That justification might have worked once, I tell her, feeling the corpse god burn hot with fury inside my chest. But years have passed since your ancestors made that choice, and your tribe is clearly thriving now. There's no excuse left for continuing to harvest a god's pain. Once your survival no longer genuinely depends on it, at some point, convenience just becomes cruelty wearing survival's old, expired justification. Vashti's guards tense further, sensing the conversation sliding rapidly toward confrontation. And I notice Bracca's old training instincts in my disciples kicking in, each of them subtly shifting into ready stances. You came here intending to take something that doesn't belong to you, Vashti says, voice hardening considerably. I won't allow strangers to dismantle the foundation of my tribe's entire survival without resistance. Then we have a genuine problem, I tell her, feeling black fire already curling warm and ready beneath my skin, because I have no intention of leaving Turin sealed inside the vault for even one more night. Vashti raises one hand, and her 6 guards immediately level weapons toward our group, the tense standoff crackling with the particular electricity that precedes violence. Nobody's genuinely eager to start. Last move, last warning, she says coldly. Leave Hollow Reach territory now, and I'll allow it without consequence. Stay, and you'll discover exactly why this tribe survived a drought your ancestors couldn't. I look at my disciples, each one holding steady despite obvious fear, and feel something settle firmly into place inside my chest. The same resolve that once made me stand my ground against an actual god. We're not leaving without Turin, I say simply, and the moment the words leave my mouth, Vashti's guards surge forward exactly as I expected. They eventually would once words stop working entirely. Scylla moves first, water from a nearby trough surging upward and outward, wrapping around to guard's legs and freezing solid the instant. Her totem channels enough focused intent into the sudden ice. Tomek's host slams into the ground between us and a 3rd guard, sending a destructive pulse rippling through the earth that knocks the man backward off his feet. Before he manages a single swing, Yenna simply vanishes from sight entirely, reappearing seconds later behind a fourth guard with enough force in her strike to drop him cleanly, without ever once being seen approaching in the darkness. Marin hesitates only briefly before her own totem flares, sorrow made tangible, washing over the remaining two guards in a wave that doesn't harm them physically but leaves them, suddenly, overwhelmingly grief-stricken. They drop their weapons, weeping uncontrollably, and Marin's face shows genuine discomfort at using her totem this way. Though I notice relief too. Relief that her ability can subdue, without requiring lasting harm. Vashti alone remains standing, her own totem mark flaring as she finally reveals what's clearly a powerful bloodline ability. Years of harvested totem energy crackling visibly across her clenched fists. You'll regret this choice, she snarls, lunging forward with strength clearly amplified far beyond anything natural. Strength built directly on top of Turn's centuries of carefully harvested suffering. I meet her, strike head on. Black fire wrapping around my forearm exactly the way it did against the hollow shepherd, and the impact between us sends a visible shockwave rippling outward through the dirt. You're fighting with stolen strength, I tell her, pushing back against the pressure of her amplified blow. Everything powering your fists right now belongs to someone. You've kept screaming in the dark for years. Vashti's confidence flickers, just slightly, just enough that I can feel her hesitation bleeding into her next strike. And the corpse god seizes that exact moment to whisper something urgent directly into my thoughts. Let me speak to her directly, it says, and before I can fully process the request, black fire spreads from my chest outward, not as an attack, but as something closer to a voice finally allowed to speak again. You stole my siblings' pain for your own survival, the corpse god says through me, voice layered with 3 centuries of accumulated weight. That makes even Vashti's amplified strength stagger backward in shock. I understand survivals cost better than anyone alive. I paid centuries of buried guilt for one terrible mistake. But mistakes deserve correction, not endless repetition disguised as tradition. And necessity. Vashti's face contorts, caught between fury and something that might genuinely be the first flicker of doubt she has allowed herself to feel about her tribe's foundational choice in longer than she can remember. My ancestors made this choice, she says, though her voice wavers now, considerably less certain than it sounded minutes earlier, before an actual ancient god started speaking directly through my own borrowed mouth. Your ancestors made a desperate choice during a genuine crisis. The corpse god answers, you're maintaining that choice during comfortable prosperity. Those are not remotely the same moral situation, Elder Vashti. For a long, tense moment, nobody moves. The standoff hanging suspended between violence and the fragile possibility that words might actually accomplish something words rarely manage during confrontations like this. Then Vashti's shoulders slump, just slightly, just enough that I recognize the exact posture of someone finally allowing themselves to consider a truth they've spent years carefully avoiding looking at directly. Show me, she finally says, voice quiet now, stripped of its earlier authority. Show me what you do instead. If releasing this totem doesn't immediately destroy everything my tribe has built around it. It's a fair question, and an honest one, and I respect her enough in this moment to actually answer it carefully instead of simply demanding immediate, unconditional surrender of something she's protected for years. We help your tribe transition, I tell her. Sila can show your healers proper water cultivation. Totem can teach proper land management. We don't just take, we replace what we remove with something sustainable. Vashti studies me for a long moment, then finally, slowly, lowers her remaining defensive stance entirely, gesturing for her conscious guards to stand down from whatever's left of their abandoned positions. Open the vault, she says to a nearby attendant, voice heavy with the particular exhaustion of someone making a decision they've been avoiding for considerably longer than they'd ever admit out loud. The vault doors groan open slowly, releasing a wave of cold air and the constant, low-keening sound Yenna described, suffering made audible after years of careful, deliberate, profitable containment. Inside, the totem stone sits cracked but never allowed to fully open. Iron bands wrapped around it exactly the way Vashti's ancestors designed centuries ago, to harvest power, without ever releasing whatever's inside. I approach carefully, placing my marked palm against the cold stone, and immediately feel an overwhelming wave of despair wash through me. Centuries of accumulated suffering finally finding somewhere to flow. Turin, the corpse god whispers through me, voice cracking with something I've never heard from it before. It's me. It's actually me. I thought the shepherd erased every single one of us. Centuries ago, the keening sound shifts, just slightly, the constant suffering pausing for one brief Fragile moment of what might genuinely be recognition breaking through years of carefully harvested, deliberately maintained agony. Brother, a voice finally whispers back, so faint I almost miss it entirely beneath the vault's lingering echo. Is it really you? I stopped believing anyone was coming a very, very long time ago. I'm here, I say aloud, speaking for both myself and the corpse god simultaneously. We're both here, and we're going to break these bands properly this time, the way they should have been broken years ago. With Vashti's reluctant permission, Tomic's totem channels destructive force into the iron bands, each strike carefully calculated to crack restraint without harming the stone, or whatever fragile life sealed inside. The final band shatters with a sound like a held breath finally released. After years of careful holding, and the totem stone splits fully open, releasing a wave of pressure that knocks several nearby guards backward. What emerges isn't immediately a person, not yet, just raw, formless suffering given temporary shape, twisting and writhing in a way that makes even my own settled corpse god flinch with obvious, painful recognition. Turin, the corpse god calls gently, no longer through my voice, but directly, some part of its presence reaching outward to steady its suffering, sibling the way Vas once steadied my own panic first lessons. Slowly, painfully, the writhing shape settles into something resembling a young man, hollow-eyed and gaunt, his skin marked with jagged lines considerably darker and more severe than even Marin's had been. Originally, he doesn't speak at first. He just kneels in the broken vault, shaking, and Marin moves forward without hesitation, kneeling beside him with a particular understanding only another awakened sibling could offer. You're safe now, she tells him quietly. I know it doesn't feel that way yet. It didn't feel that way for me either, not for weeks. But it gets easier. I promise you, it actually gets easier eventually. Turin looks up at her, then at me, then finally at Vashti standing uncertain near the vault's entrance, and something in his hollow expression shifts toward cautious, fragile, exhausted hope for the very first time. Why would she help me? He asks quietly, voice rough with centuries of disuse. She's the one who kept me screaming in here. Why would the person who hurt me suddenly decide to help me now, after everything? Because people can choose differently once they finally understand what their choices actually cost someone else. I tell him honestly, watching Vashti's face tighten with obvious, uncomfortable, but genuine shame. It doesn't undo years of harvested suffering. I continue. But it's a start. Starts matter more than most people give them credit for, especially when the alternative is continuing the exact same harm indefinitely. Vashti steps forward slowly, kneeling despite her status as elder, lowering herself to Turin's level with obvious difficulty given years of authority that clearly never required this particular kind of humility before. I cannot undo what my tribe did to you, she says quietly, voice stripped completely of its earlier commanding tone. But I will spend whatever years remain to me making sure no other totem suffers this way again. Turin studies her for a long moment, centuries of despair weighing behind hollow eyes that have apparently learned to recognize manipulation as easily as they've learned to recognize genuine remorse. I'll hold you to that, he finally says, voice still rough but considerably steadier than it sounded minutes earlier. And if you break the promise, I imagine my brother and his disciples will hear about it quickly. Vashti actually laughs, short and surprised, the first genuinely human sound I've heard from her since this entire confrontation began. Fair enough, she says. I suspect word travels fast through your particular network. Over the following days, true to my word, Scylla and Tomic begin teaching Hollow Reach's healers and farmers sustainable alternatives to harvested totem energy, slowly weaning the tribe off centuries of convenient cruelty. It's slow work, and not every elder agrees with Vashti's decision. Several quietly grumbling about lost power and abandoned tradition. But the harvesting channels running from the vault get dismantled piece by piece. Turin, meanwhile, stays close to Marin throughout the transition. The two newest siblings forming a halting friendship built on shared understanding the rest of us. Despite genuine effort, can't fully replicate, despair and sorrow understand each other in ways strength and water in. Silence simply can't, the corpse god observes quietly one evening, watching the two of them sit together near the half-dismantled vault. By the time we finally prepare to leave Hollow Reach territory, 2 weeks after first arriving, Turin has stopped flinching at sudden movement and started, tentatively, asking questions about what comes next for him. What do I do now? He asked me directly the morning we're set to depart. Gaunt face less hollow than it was, though still carrying the particular weariness of someone who's suffered far longer than anyone should. Whatever you actually want, I tell him honestly. Come with us if you want a place to keep healing. Stay here If you genuinely believe Vashti's promise and want to watch this tribe earn back your trust directly, or go anywhere else entirely, if neither of those options feels right yet, the only thing I won't do is decide your path for you the way everyone else has been deciding it for you across several centuries straight. Turin considers this for a long moment, then looks toward Marin, who's waiting nearby with a patient, hopeful expression of someone genuinely invested in whichever choice he eventually makes for himself. "I think I'll come with you," he finally says. "Not because I don't believe Vashti might keep her word, because I'd rather heal somewhere that doesn't constantly remind me of exactly how I got broken in the first place." "That's more than fair," I tell him, and our group, now numbering 5 disciples plus myself, sets out from Hollow Reach territory with considerably more weight in our packs, and considerably more purpose in our steps. 3 siblings found. For remaining, the corpse god observes quietly as we crest the final ridge separating Hollow Reach territory from the long journey back toward home and whatever waits for us there next. Last lifetime, I died alone and forgotten on a mountainside nobody remembered to mourn. This lifetime, I'm walking home with a god, 5 disciples, and a growing certainty forgotten things deserve better than erasure. 2 weeks later, back at home, Chief Dorn greets our expanded group with a particular weary affection of someone who stopped being surprised by anything involving the unforgotten boy's increasingly strange life. 5 disciples now, he says, shaking his head with obvious amusement despite the exhaustion clearly visible. After weeks of managing tribal affairs, without my presence to consult on increasingly unusual matters. At this rate, you'll need a separate longhouse just to keep training everyone properly, he adds. Though I notice genuine pride beneath the teasing. Pride in exactly how far this forgotten tribe has actually come. That night, around the same fire pit where everything began, all 5 disciples share a meal together for the first time, and watching them, something settles into place that feels considerably bigger than survival. Sila teaches Turin small water exercises meant to help ground him. During moments of overwhelming memory, Tomek shows Marin proper spear stance, just in case her totem ever needs physical backup during difficult moments. Yenna, predictably, stays quiet at the fire's edge, though I notice her sitting closer to the group than she ever sat during her first weeks here. Quiet still, but alongside people rather than apart from them entirely. This is what the corpse god actually wanted all along, I realize. Watching firelight dance across 5 faces that the wider world once dismissed as worthless. Not vengeance, not power, just somewhere to finally belong. But peace, as I've learned twice now across 2 lifetimes, never lasts particularly long. And exactly 1 month later, a new messenger arrives at our gates carrying news that makes the corpse god go suddenly silent. This time, the message comes not from a struggling tribe or a curious trading post, but from territory belonging to the Ashfall Empire, the single largest, most powerful nation across the entire known continent. They found something too, the messenger explains, breathless from weeks of hard travel. Except theirs isn't buried in a quiet ridge or sealed in a hidden vault. Theirs is openly, deliberately being weaponized. The corpse god's silence stretches uncomfortably long before it finally speaks again, voice heavier than I've heard it since the very first night at the fire pit when everything in both my lifetimes truly began. Weaponize how? I ask carefully, already dreading whatever answer waits behind the particular word. Given everything I've already learned about exactly how badly the wider world treats forgotten, suffering totems, the Ashfall Empire has built an army around it. The messenger says grimly, they call it the Hollow Legion, soldiers bonded forcibly to fragments of whatever god they have uncovered, marching toward conquest right now. How many soldiers? I ask the messenger, dreading the answer even as I ask. Because every number I imagine already sounds considerably worse than anything we've faced across either Stonebridge or Hollow Reach combined. Thousands, he answers grimly. The Hollow Legion marches under one banner, now conquering border territories, each new conquest feeding more captured totem fragments into their growing ranks. A weaponized totem isn't a sealed prisoner or a frightened newcomer, the corpse god says grimly. It's a sibling being torn apart piece by piece, fragments forced into soldiers who never consented to carry any of it. Which sibling is it? I ask the corpse god directly, feeling cold dread settle deep into my chest as I wait for an answer I already suspect might be the worst possible name it could speak right now. I don't know yet, it admits, but fragments torn from a single god and spread across thousands of soldiers explains why each soldier seems weaker than expected. According to the rumors we've heard, they're not strong because the god is weak, I realize. putting pieces together the way Vast taught me to read a battlefield before charging blindly into anything. They're strong because there's so many. That's worse than imprisonment, Turin says quietly. Imprisonment keeps you whole, just trapped. This shatters you across thousands of strangers who'll never understand what they're actually carrying. Sila's hands clench at her sides. We have to do something, she says, and for the first time since joining our group, I hear genuine anger in her voice instead of the careful caution she's maintained since Hollow Reach. Gathering an army strong enough to challenge an entire empire feels impossible with 5 disciples. And 1 corpse god, even one as powerful as the being I carry after centuries of hard-won healing. Last lifetime, I died running from a problem considerably smaller than this. This lifetime, running has never once been an option I seriously consider, no matter how impossible the threat becomes. Chief Dorn, listening quietly, finally speaks from where he's been standing near the longhouse entrance, his weathered face set with the determination he reserves for genuine crisis moments. This tribe owes you everything, he says simply. Whatever you decide about the Ashfall Empire, you won't be doing it with 5 disciples alone. You'll be doing it with every 100 this tribe trained. I appreciate that, I tell him honestly, though something in my chest tightens at the thought of asking an entire tribe to march toward conflict with an empire powerful enough to weaponize a god. We're not ready for that scale of conflict yet, I admit. Looking at my 5 disciples, each talented, but still relatively new to fully understanding their totem's deepest capabilities under pressure. Before we march against an empire, I continue, we need allies, other forgotten totems, other tribes who understand what it means to be dismissed by people who never bothered looking closely enough. There is still for siblings unaccounted for. It reminds me, if even one carries strength comparable to Turin's, finding them before confronting the empire might tip impossible odds toward merely difficult ones. Then that's our path forward, I decide, feeling the shape of an actual strategy finally forming instead of simply reacting desperately to whatever crisis arrives next at our increasingly busy gates without warning. We find the remaining siblings. We train every disciple as thoroughly as time allows. And when we're finally ready, we march on the Ashfall Empire with considerably more than 5 disciples and 1 chief. Marin reaches over and squeezes Turin's hand gently, both clearly thinking about the same fragmented sibling fate. They each barely escaped through nothing more than fortunate timing and 1 stubborn boy. Whoever's being torn apart out there right now, Turin says quietly, deserves the same chance we got. Whatever it takes, I'm not leaving that sibling shattered a single day longer than necessary. That night, the corpse god finally shares something it's kept buried even from me. Something it apparently needed considerably more trust before revealing across our entire shared existence so far. There's an 8th name, it admits quietly. Not one of the original 7 siblings, something older. Something the Hollow Shepherd was originally built to hunt, before it twisted its purpose entirely. My chest goes cold at the implication. You're telling me there's something even the thing that hunted gods was built to hunt, I say slowly, feeling the scope of everything expand uncomfortably further. I don't know its name, the corpse god admits. Only fragments of fragments. Memories buried so deep centuries of forced burial couldn't fully erase them. But whatever the Empire found isn't entirely random. Someone is searching deliberately. It continues, someone who understands exactly what buried totems are, and exactly how dangerous they become once weaponized at sufficient scale across enough soldiers. That's a problem considerably larger than one empire's ambition, I realize, feeling the weight of everything still hidden settle across shoulders that have already carried more than 19 forgotten years allow. Whatever's coming, I tell my disciples the next morning, gathering all 5 along with Chief Dorn and Orla near the same fire pit, where this entire impossible journey first began 3 years ago for me alone. This isn't just about saving 1 more fragmented sibling anymore. Someone out there understands exactly what we are, and exactly how to use that against a world that spent centuries forgetting we existed. We're not just rescuing totems anymore, I continue, watching understanding settle across each disciple's face. We're protecting every forgotten thing left in this world from someone hunting them all down. Yenna says nothing, as usual, but I notice her totem mark flickering faintly under the firelight. Quiet resolve burning steady where loud declarations would have felt entirely wrong coming from her. Turin and Marin exchange a look loaded with shared, unspoken history neither needs to explain anymore. The siblings who understand exactly what it costs to be hunted and what it means to fight back. Together, Chief Dorn raises his cup toward the fire, and a small, Informal toast that somehow carries more weight than any formal ceremony. This tribe is organized across every season I can actually remember living through. To forgotten things that refuse to stay forgotten, he says simply. And every person around that fire pit, disciple and chief and one ancient healing god alike, finally drinks to exactly that shared, stubborn purpose. Tomorrow we start training harder than ever, I tell my disciples as the fire burns low. Tomorrow we start searching for the remaining siblings. Eventually, we march toward whatever's hunting us all deliberately. The next 6 months pass faster than either of my 2 lifetimes combined, folded entirely into training, scouting, and the slow work of finding what's left scattered across this world. We find the 4th sibling first, a totem called the Devourer of Silence, guarding an abandoned mountain shrine where isolated monks worshipped it for generations without ever knowing. His name is Corwin, and unlike Martin's panic or Turn's despair, he simply refuses to speak at all for 3 weeks straight, communicating only through small gestures. Silence understands silence, Yenna tells me one evening, watching Corwin train beside her. To totems built around absence finally finding someone who doesn't need words. The 5th sibling proves harder to find, hidden inside a living person who'd carried an unbonded totem fragment unknowingly since birth, without anyone ever realizing it. Her name is Petra, a blacksmith's daughter, and the totem inside her finally cracks open during a violent dockside brawl that nearly burns half her village down. Unlike the others, Petra doesn't need rescuing from imprisonment. She needs help learning control, the same lesson Vass once drilled into me beside the eastern wall. 6 months pass, 6 siblings found, 6 disciples trained. The corpse god grows steadier with every reunion. 3 centuries of guilt slowly becoming hard-earned peace. The siblings remain, it tells me one cold autumn evening. The Devourer of Hope, last known fragment, and one more whose name even I no longer remember, both scattered somewhere unknown. We'll find hope eventually, I tell it, watching 7 disciples train below. Petra's fury balanced against Corwin's silence, Marin and Turn anchoring the group's center. But the Ashfall Empire isn't waiting, I add grimly, reading the latest scout report Kasich forwarded through 3 separate trading posts before it finally reached us. The Hollow Legion has conquered 4 border territories in 6 months alone, swallowing tribes whole and forcibly bonding survivors to fresh harvested fragments. Their march hasn't slowed, the report states. Their numbers keep growing faster than any conventional army should, fed by an endless supply of stolen, fragmented power. Chief Dorn calls a full council the night the report arrives, and I watch an entire tribe vote, unanimously, to march toward a fight nobody fully understands yet. We're not just defending borders anymore, Dorn announces, his voice carrying across a fire pit far larger than the one that once mocked a forgotten boy years ago. We're answering a call that started the moment this tribe listened to a totem. Everyone else dismissed, and that call hasn't finished while a god still suffers fragmented. The march toward Ashfall territory takes nearly a month, gathering allies exactly as I'd hoped. Stonebridge sending hunters, Hollow Reach sending healers under Vashti. By the time we reach the outer border, our combined force numbers nearly 400. Smaller than the Legion's thousands, but armed with one thing they lack: choice. Every fighter beside us chose this freely, I remind my disciples, while every soldier in the Legion had suffering forced into their body, without ever once being asked. That difference matters more than numbers, the corpse god adds, settling into the confidence 3 years of healing earned it. Stolen power burns hot but fades fast. The first skirmish happens at dawn along a river crossing. The Legion's 4 soldiers moving with the jerky, uncertain coordination of people fighting borrowed power. Sila's water totem turns the river against them while Tomic's pulses shatter their barricades, faster than their commanders can reorganize any coherent defense. Petra's fury proves devastating against 4 soldiers specifically, her totem recognizing stolen rage and amplifying it backward against their own confused ranks. We win without a single death on our side, and capture nearly 30 soldiers alive, giving Turn and Marin their first real chance at something we've planned: extraction. Working together, the siblings carefully draw stolen fragments back out of each captured soldier, the process agonizing, but considerably gentler than leaving it embedded. The freed soldiers mostly just collapse into exhausted relief, several weeping with a particular gratitude of people who never wanted this fight in the first place. We're not soldiers, one admits afterward. We're conscripted farmers and fishermen. They forced these fragments into us or threatened our families. Nobody asked us anything. That confirms what I suspected, I tell my gathered disciples that evening. The Empire isn't building an army of believers. It's building one of desperate, coerced people. which means the Legion's true strength is smaller than it appears, Dorn observes, reading exactly this kind of desperation the way years of leadership taught him to. If we extract fragments faster than they bond new conscripts, the corpse god adds, we weaken the entire foundation. Their conquest depends on one soldier at a time. Over the following weeks, that becomes our strategy. Striking patrols not to destroy them, but to capture and extract. Freeing soldiers faster than the Empire replaces them. Word spreads through conquered territories faster than any Imperial propaganda. Whispered tales of an unforgotten army that frees soldiers instead of slaughtering them. By the time we approach the capital, our force has nearly tripled, swollen with freed soldiers and liberated tribes choosing freely to stand against force power. The capital sits behind massive stone walls clearly built for siege. But Yenna's scouting reveals something far more troubling than simple fortification waiting inside. The throne room radiates totem energy, she reports, voice tight with unease. Not fragmented dot hole. Whatever they're keeping at the center isn't scattered at all. The corpse god goes utterly silent. The particular silence I've learned means recognition far more dreadful than anything we've faced since the shepherd first emerged. That's not a sibling. It finally says, voice heavy with old fear. That's the 8th name. Someone found what even the shepherd couldn't locate across 3 centuries. My chest goes cold. You're telling me the Emperor has the thing originally built to hunt gods like you? I say slowly, feeling this conflict's true scale shift beneath us. I don't know if they control it or merely contain it, the corpse god admits. But if they're weaponizing my siblings while holding something this dangerous, nothing here is accidental. That night, before our final approach, I gather every disciple and allied chief and explain exactly what Yenna found, watching grim understanding settle across tired faces. Whatever waits behind those walls isn't just an emperor with a stolen army, I tell them honestly. It's something old enough the gods needed a hunter built specifically for it. Silas steps forward first, Totem glowing steady despite obvious fear. We didn't come this far to turn back now, she says simply, and one by one, everyone echoes her resolve. At dawn, we breach the outer wall, Tomic's totem carving through stone the Empire's engineers never anticipated needing to withstand against focused godly fury. That's worse than imprisonment, Turin says quietly. Imprisonment keeps you whole, just trapped. This shatters you across thousands of strangers who'll never understand what they're actually carrying. Silas' hands clench at her sides. We have to do something, she says, and for the first time since joining our group, I hear genuine anger in her voice instead of the careful caution she's maintained since Hollow Reach. Gathering an army strong enough to challenge an entire empire feels impossible with 5 disciples. And one corpse god, even one as powerful as the being I carry after centuries of hard-won healing. Last lifetime, I died running from a problem considerably smaller than this. This lifetime, running has never once been an option I seriously consider, no matter how impossible the threat becomes. Chief Dorn, listening quietly, finally speaks from where he's been standing near the longhouse entrance, his weathered face set with the determination he reserves for genuine crisis moments. This tribe owes you everything, he says simply. Whatever you decide about the Ashfall Empire, you won't be doing it with 5 disciples alone. You'll be doing it with every hunter this tribe trained. I appreciate that, I tell him honestly, though something in my chest tightens at the thought of asking an entire tribe to march toward conflict with an empire powerful enough to weaponize a god. We're not ready for that scale of conflict yet, I admit, looking at my 5 disciples, each talented, but still relatively new to fully understanding their totem's deepest capabilities under pressure. Before we march against an empire, I continue, we need allies, other forgotten totems, other tribes who understand what it means to be dismissed by people who never bothered looking closely enough. There is still for siblings unaccounted for. It reminds me, if even one carries strength comparable to Turin's, finding them before confronting the Empire might tip impossible odds toward merely difficult ones. Then that's our path forward, I decide, feeling the shape of an actual strategy finally forming instead of simply reacting desperately to whatever crisis arrives next at our increasingly busy gates without warning. We find the remaining siblings. We train every disciple as thoroughly as time allows. And when we're finally ready, we march on the Ashfall Empire with considerably more than 5 disciples and 1 chief. Marin reaches over and squeezes Turin's hand gently, both clearly thinking about the same fragmented sibling fate. They each barely escaped through nothing more than fortunate timing and one stubborn boy. Whoever's being torn apart out there right now, Turin says quietly, deserves the same chance we got, whatever it takes. I'm not leaving that sibling shattered a single day longer than necessary. That night, the corpse god finally shares something it's kept buried even from me. Something it apparently needed considerably more trust before revealing across our entire shared existence so far. There's an eighth name, it admits quietly. Not one of the original 7 siblings, something older. Something the Hollow Shepherd was originally built to hunt, before it twisted its purpose entirely. My chest goes cold at the implication. You're telling me there's something even the thing that hunted gods was built to hunt, I say slowly, feeling the scope of everything expand uncomfortably further. I don't know its name, the corpse god admits. Only fragments of fragments. Memories buried so deep centuries of forced burial couldn't fully erase them. But whatever the Empire found isn't entirely random. Someone is searching deliberately. It continues, someone who understands exactly what buried totems are, and exactly how dangerous they become once weaponized at sufficient scale across enough soldiers. That's a problem considerably larger than one empire's ambition, I realize, feeling the weight of everything still hidden settle across shoulders that have already carried more than 19 forgotten years allow. Whatever's coming, I tell my disciples the next morning, gathering all 5 along with Chief Dorn and Orla near the same fire pit, where this entire impossible journey first began 3 years ago for me alone. This isn't just about saving one more fragmented sibling anymore. Someone out there understands exactly what we are, and exactly how to use that against a world that spent centuries forgetting we existed. We're not just rescuing totems anymore, I continue, watching understanding settle across each disciple's face. We're protecting every forgotten thing left in this world from someone hunting them all down. Yenna says nothing, as usual, but I notice her totem mark flickering faintly under the firelight. Quiet resolve burning steady where loud declarations would have felt entirely wrong coming from her. Turin and Marin exchange a look loaded with shared, unspoken history neither needs to explain anymore. To siblings who understand exactly what it costs to be hunted and what it means to fight back. Together, Chief Dorn raises his cup toward the fire, and a small, informal toast that somehow carries more weight than any formal ceremony. This tribe is organized across every season I can actually remember living through, to forgotten things that refuse to stay forgotten, he says simply. And every person around that fire pit, disciple and chief and one ancient, healing god alike, finally drinks to exactly that shared, stubborn purpose. Tomorrow we start training harder than ever, I tell my disciples as the fire burns low. Tomorrow we start searching for the remaining siblings. Eventually, we march toward whatever's hunting us all deliberately. The next 6 months pass faster than either of my 2 lifetimes combined, folded entirely into training, scouting, and the slow work of finding what's left scattered across this world. We find the 4th sibling first, a totem called the Devourer of Silence, guarding an abandoned mountain shrine where isolated monks worshipped it for generations without ever knowing. His name is Corwin, and unlike Marin's panic or Turin's despair, he simply refuses to speak at all for 3 weeks straight, communicating only through small gestures. Silence understands silence, Yenna tells me one evening, watching Corwin train beside her. To totems built around absence finally finding someone who doesn't need words. The 5th sibling proves harder to find, hidden inside a living person who'd carried an unbonded totem fragment unknowingly since birth, without anyone ever realizing it. Her name is Petra, a blacksmith's daughter, and the totem inside her finally cracks open during a violent dockside brawl that nearly burns half her village down. Unlike the others, Petra doesn't need rescuing from imprisonment. She needs help learning control, the same lesson Vass once drilled into me beside the eastern wall. 6 months pass, 6 siblings found, 6 disciples trained. The corpse god grows steadier with every reunion. 3 centuries of guilt slowly becoming hard-earned peace. To siblings remain, it tells me one cold autumn evening. The Devourer of Hope, last known fragment, and one more whose name even I no longer remember, both scattered somewhere unknown. We'll find hope eventually, I tell it, watching 7 disciples train below. Petra's fury balanced against Corwin's silence, Marin in turn anchoring the group's center. But the Ashfall Empire isn't waiting, I grimly, reading the latest scout report Kasich forwarded through 3 separate trading posts before it finally reached us. The Hollow Legion has conquered for border territories in 6 months alone, swallowing tribes whole and forcibly bonding survivors to fresh harvested fragments. Their march hasn't slowed, the report states. Their numbers keep growing faster than any conventional army should, fed by an endless supply of stolen, fragmented power. Chief Dorn calls a full council the night the report arrives, and I watch an entire tribe vote, unanimously, to march toward a fight nobody fully understands yet. We're not just defending borders anymore, Dorn announces, his voice carrying across a fire pit far larger than the one that once mocked a forgotten boy years ago. We're answering a call that started the moment this tribe listened to a totem. Everyone else dismissed, and that call hasn't finished while a god still suffers fragmented. The march toward Ashfall territory takes nearly a month, gathering allies exactly as I'd hoped. Stonebridge sending hunters, Hollow Reach sending healers under Vashti. By the time we reach the outer border, our combined force numbers nearly 400. Smaller than the Legion's thousands, but armed with one thing they lack: choice. Every fighter beside us chose this freely. I remind my disciples, while every soldier in the Legion had suffering forced into their body, without ever once being asked. That difference matters more than numbers, the corpse god adds, settling into the confidence 3 years of healing earned it. Stolen power burns hot, but fades fast. The first skirmish happens at dawn along a river crossing. The Legion's force soldiers moving with the jerky, uncertain coordination of people fighting borrowed power. Sila's water totem turns the river against them while Tomic's pulses shatter their barricades. Faster than their commanders can reorganize any coherent defense, Petra's fury proves devastating against force soldiers specifically, her totem recognizing stolen rage and amplifying it backward against their own confused ranks. We win without a single death on our side, and capture nearly 30 soldiers alive, giving Turin and Marin their first real chance at something we've planned: extraction. Working together, the siblings carefully draw stolen fragments back out of each captured soldier, the process agonizing, but considerably gentler than leaving it embedded. The freed soldiers mostly just collapse into exhausted relief, several weeping with a particular gratitude of people who never wanted this fight in the first place. We're not soldiers, one admits afterward. We're conscripted farmers and fishermen. They forced these fragments into us or threatened our families. Nobody asked us anything. That confirms what I suspected. I tell my gathered disciples that evening. The Empire isn't building an army of believers. It's building one of desperate, coerced people. Which means the Legion's true strength is smaller than it appears, Dorn observes, reading exactly this kind of desperation the way years of leadership taught him to. If we extract fragments faster than they bond new conscripts, the corpse god adds, we weaken the entire foundation. Their conquest depends on one soldier at a time. Over the following weeks, that becomes our strategy. Striking patrols not to destroy them, but to capture and extract. Freeing soldiers faster than the Empire replaces them. Word spreads through conquered territories faster than any Imperial propaganda. Whispered tales of an unforgotten army that frees soldiers instead of slaughtering them. By the time we approach the capital, our force has nearly tripled, swollen with freed soldiers and liberated tribes choosing freely to stand against force power. The capital sits behind massive stone walls clearly built for siege. But Yenna's scouting reveals something far more troubling than simple fortification waiting inside. The throne room radiates totem energy, she reports, voice tight with unease. Not fragmented dot hole. Whatever they're keeping at the center isn't scattered at all. The corpse god goes utterly silent. The particular silence I've learned means recognition far more dreadful than anything we've faced since the shepherd first emerged. That's not a sibling. It finally says, voice heavy with old fear. That's the 8th name. Someone found what even the shepherd couldn't locate across 3 centuries. My chest goes cold. You're telling me the Emperor has the thing originally built to hunt gods like you? I say slowly, feeling this conflict's true scale shift beneath us. I don't know if they control it or merely contain it, the corpse god admits. But if they're weaponizing my siblings while holding something this dangerous, nothing here is accidental. That night, before our final approach, I gather every disciple and allied chief and explain exactly what Yenna found, watching grim understanding settle across tired faces. Whatever waits behind those walls isn't just an emperor with a stolen army. I tell them honestly, it's something old enough the gods needed a hunter built specifically for it. Silas steps forward first, Totemar glowing steady despite obvious fear. We didn't come this far to turn back now, she says simply, and one by one, everyone echoes her resolve. At dawn, we breach the outer wall, Tomic's totem carving through stone the Empire's engineers never anticipated needing to withstand against focused godly fury. That's worse than imprisonment, Turin says quietly. Imprisonment keeps you whole, just trapped. This shatters you across thousands of strangers who'll never understand what they're actually carrying. Sila's hands clench at her sides. We have to do something, she says, and for the first time since joining our group, I hear genuine anger in her voice instead of the careful caution she's maintained since Hollow Reach. Gathering an army strong enough to challenge an entire empire feels impossible with 5 disciples. And one corpse god, even one as powerful as the being I carry after centuries of hard-won healing. Last lifetime, I died running from a problem considerably smaller than this. This lifetime, running has never once been an option I seriously consider, no matter how impossible the threat becomes. Chief Dorn, listening quietly, finally speaks from where he's been standing near the longhouse entrance, his weathered face set with the determination he reserves for genuine crisis moments. This tribe owes you everything, he says simply. Whatever you decide about the Ashfall Empire, you won't be doing it with 5 disciples alone. You'll be doing it with every 100 this tribe trained. I appreciate that, I tell him honestly, though something in my chest tightens at the thought of asking an entire tribe to march toward conflict with an empire powerful enough to weaponize a god. We're not ready for that scale of conflict yet, I admit, looking at my 5 disciples, each talented, but still relatively new to fully understanding their totem's deepest capabilities under pressure. Before we march against an empire, I continue, we need allies, other forgotten totems, other tribes who understand what it means to be dismissed by people who never bothered looking closely enough. There is still for siblings unaccounted for. It reminds me, if even one carries strength comparable to Turin's, finding them before confronting the empire might tip impossible odds toward merely difficult ones. Then that's our path forward, I decide, feeling the shape of an actual strategy finally forming instead of simply reacting desperately to whatever crisis arrives next at our increasingly busy gates without warning. We find the remaining siblings. We train every disciple as thoroughly as time allows. And when we're finally ready, we march on the Ashfall Empire with considerably more than 5 disciples and 1 chief. Marin reaches over and squeezes Turin's hand gently, both clearly thinking about the same fragmented sibling fate. They each barely escaped through nothing more than fortunate timing and one stubborn boy. Whoever's being torn apart out there right now, Turin says quietly, deserves the same chance we got, whatever it takes. I'm not leaving that sibling shattered a single day longer than necessary. That night, the corpse god finally shares something it's kept buried even from me. Something it apparently needed considerably more trust. Before revealing across our entire shared existence so far, there's an 8th name. It admits quietly, not one of the original 7 siblings, something older. Something the Hollow Shepherd was originally built to hunt, before it twisted its purpose entirely. My chest goes cold at the implication. You're telling me there's something even the thing that hunted gods was built to hunt, I say slowly, feeling the scope of everything expand uncomfortably further. I don't know its name, the corpse god admits. Only fragments of fragments. Memories buried so deep centuries of forced burial couldn't fully erase them. But whatever the Empire found isn't entirely random. Someone is searching deliberately. It continues, someone who understands exactly what buried totems are, and exactly how dangerous they become once weaponized at sufficient scale across enough soldiers. That's a problem considerably larger than one empire's ambition, I realize, feeling the weight of everything still hidden settle across shoulders that have already carried more than 19 forgotten years allow. Whatever's coming, I tell my disciples the next morning, gathering all 5 along with Chief Dorn and Orla near the same fire pit, where this entire impossible journey first began 3 years ago for me alone. This isn't just about saving one more fragmented sibling anymore. Someone out there understands exactly what we are, and exactly how to use it against a world that spent centuries forgetting we existed. We're not just rescuing totems anymore, I continue, watching understanding settle across each disciple's face. We're protecting every forgotten thing left in this world from someone hunting them all down. Yenna says nothing, as usual, but I notice her totem mark flickering faintly under the firelight. Quiet resolve burning steady where loud declarations would have felt entirely wrong coming from her. Turin and Marin exchange a look loaded with shared, unspoken history neither needs to explain anymore. To siblings who understand exactly what it costs to be hunted and what it means to fight back together. Chief Dorn raises his cup toward the fire, and a small, informal toast that somehow carries more weight than any formal ceremony. This tribe is organized across every season I can actually remember living through, to forgotten things that refuse to stay forgotten, he says simply. And every person around that fire pit, disciple and chief and one ancient, healing god alike, finally drinks to exactly that shared, stubborn purpose. Tomorrow we start training harder than ever, I tell my disciples as the fire burns low. Tomorrow we start searching for the remaining siblings. Eventually, we march toward whatever's hunting us all deliberately. The next 6 months pass faster than either of my 2 lifetimes combined, folded entirely into training, scouting, and the slow work of finding what's left scattered across this world. We find the 4th sibling first, a totem called the Devourer of Silence, guarding an abandoned mountain shrine where isolated monks worshipped it for generations without ever knowing. His name is Corwin, and unlike Martin's panic or Turn's despair, he simply refuses to speak at all for 3 weeks straight, communicating only through small gestures. Silence understands silence, Yenna tells me one evening, watching Corwin train beside her. The totems built around absence finally finding someone who doesn't need words. The 5th sibling proves harder to find, hidden inside a living person who'd carried an unbonded totem fragment unknowingly since birth, without anyone ever realizing it. Her name is Petra, a blacksmith's daughter, and the totem inside her finally cracks open during a violent dockside brawl that nearly burns half her village down. Unlike the others, Petra doesn't need rescuing from imprisonment. She needs help learning control, the same lesson Vass once drilled into me beside the eastern wall. 6 months pass, 6 siblings found, 6 disciples trained. The corpse god grows steadier with every reunion. 3 centuries of guilt slowly becoming hard-earned peace. The siblings remain, it tells me, one cold autumn evening. The Devourer of Hope, last known fragment, and one more whose name even I no longer remember, both scattered somewhere unknown. We'll find hope eventually, I tell it, watching 7 disciples train below. Petra's fury balanced against Corwin's silence, Marion in turn anchoring the group's center. But the Ashfall Empire isn't waiting, I add grimly, reading the latest scout report Kasich forwarded through 3 separate trading posts before it finally reached us. The Hollow Legion has conquered 4 border territories in 6 months alone, swallowing tribes whole and forcibly bonding survivors to fresh harvested fragments. Their march hasn't slowed, the report states. Their numbers keep growing faster than any conventional army should, fed by an endless supply of stolen, fragmented power. Chief Dorn calls a full council the night the report arrives, and I watch an entire tribe vote, unanimously, to march toward a fight nobody fully understands yet. We're not just defending borders anymore, Dorn announces, his voice carrying across a fire pit far larger than the one that once mocked a forgotten boy years ago. We're answering a call that started the moment this tribe listened to a totem. Everyone else dismissed, and that call hasn't finished while a god still suffers fragmented. The march toward Ashfall territory takes nearly a month, gathering allies exactly as I'd hoped. Stonebridge sending hunters, Hollow Reach sending healers under Vashti. By the time we reach the outer border, our combined force numbers nearly 400. Smaller than the Legion's thousands, but armed with one thing they lack: choice. Every fighter beside us chose this freely, I remind my disciples, while every soldier in the Legion had suffering forced into their body, without ever once being asked. That difference matters more than numbers, the corpse god adds, settling into the confidence 3 years of healing earned it. Stolen power burns hot but fades fast. The first skirmish happens at dawn along a river crossing. The Legion's force soldiers moving with the jerky, uncertain coordination of people fighting borrowed power. Sila's water totem turns the river against them while Tomic's pulses shatter their barricades. Faster than their commanders can reorganize any coherent defense, Petra's fury proves devastating against force soldiers specifically, her totem recognizing stolen rage and amplifying it backward against their own confused ranks. We win without a single death on our side, and capture nearly 30 soldiers alive, giving Turn and Marin their first real chance at something we've planned: extraction. Working together, the siblings carefully draw stolen fragments back out of each captured soldier, the process agonizing, but considerably gentler than leaving it embedded. The freed soldiers mostly just collapse into exhausted relief, several weeping with a particular gratitude of people who never wanted this fight in the first place. We're not soldiers, one admits afterward. We're conscripted farmers and fishermen. They forced these fragments into us or threatened our families. Nobody asked us anything. That confirms what I suspected, I tell my gathered disciples that evening. The Empire isn't building an army of believers. It's building one of desperate, coerced people, which means the Legion's true strength is smaller than it appears, Dorn observes, reading exactly this kind of desperation the way years of leadership taught him to. If we extract fragments faster than they bond new conscripts, the corpse god adds, we weaken the entire foundation their conquest depends on, one soldier at a time. Over the following weeks, that becomes our strategy. Striking patrols not to destroy them, but to capture and extract. freeing soldiers faster than the Empire replaces them. Word spreads through conquered territories faster than any Imperial propaganda. Whispered tales of an unforgotten army that frees soldiers instead of slaughtering them. By the time we approach the capital, our force has nearly tripled, swollen with freed soldiers and liberated tribes choosing freely to stand against force power. The capital sits behind massive stone walls clearly built for siege. But Yenna's scouting reveals something far more troubling than simple fortification waiting inside. The throne room radiates totem energy, she reports, voice tight with unease. Not fragmented dot hole. Whatever they're keeping at the center isn't scattered at all. The corpse god goes utterly silent. The particular silence I've learned means recognition far more dreadful than anything we've faced since the shepherd first emerged. That's not a sibling. It finally says, voice heavy with old fear. That's the 8th name. Someone found what even the shepherd couldn't locate across 3 centuries. My chest goes cold. You're telling me the Emperor has the thing originally built to hunt gods like you? I say slowly, feeling this conflict's true scale shift beneath us. I don't know if they control it or merely contain it, the corpse god admits. But if they're weaponizing my siblings while holding something this dangerous, nothing here is accidental. That night, before our final approach, I gather every disciple and allied chief and explain exactly what Yenna found, watching grim understanding settle across tired faces. Whatever waits behind those walls isn't just an emperor with a stolen army. I tell them honestly, it's something old enough the gods needed a hunter built specifically for it. Silas steps forward first, Totem glowing steady despite obvious fear. We didn't come this far to turn back now, she says simply, and one by one, everyone echoes her resolve. At dawn, we breach the outer wall, Tomic's totem carving through stone the Empire's engineers never anticipated needing to withstand against focused godly fury.